IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Wednesday. You guys know what that means. It is time for the midweek rundown. We have a bunch of different topics that we're going to be covering today, Brian. A lot of good ones. I mean, Marcus Freeman had his press conference from earlier today. We're going to talk through that. We're going to give a ranking to where Notre Dame's offensive position groups stand right now in the spring, which will kind of be an ongoing evaluation as the offseason goes on. We'll do one post-spring. We'll do one heading into fall camp. So a lot of exciting news there. And then we're going to be talking about some big recruiting sleepers. There's just been a common trend that there are some players that commit to Notre Dame, they get overlooked, but then to the surprise of at least not the two people sitting on this side of the screen, that they end up having really solid careers in South Bend. And then we're going to tie a bow on everything and talk about some impactful quarterback battles going on around college football. So, Brian, a lot of fun topics to dive into today, man.
I'm so excited that we get to talk about a quarterback battle that has nothing to do with Notre Dame. As much as some people are trying to push, let's talk about the backup quarterback battle, which is kind of irrelevant right now since, one of the talented players as part of that isn't even on campus. It's going to be one of those days we don't have to worry about that. But no, there's some very intriguing quarterback battles in college football, Trev. And, we put a post up on the message board yesterday kind of asking people, like, what are some things that you'd like to hear about? And we were pleasantly surprised at how many people want to talk more college football topics. And so our thought of continuing having a college football flavor on our midweek rundown is one we're going to continue. And we may even add some college football topics throughout the week. We shall see. But obviously Marcus Freeman spoke today, Trev, and I'm excited to talk about these. We should have done a position group kind of ranking before the spring started, but just kind of had a lot of things that we had to kind of get out of the way. So we're going to kind of do that now, kind of midway part of the spring. We'll do another one maybe after the spring some point in time. And then looking forward to fall when we do the same thing. So it'll be a lot of fun. We'll do that. We'll probably do defense Friday. Just a little scheduling heads up. I'm going to have surgery tomorrow, and I don't know how. It's a 9:15. I don't know how I'm going to be feeling when I get done. So I'm anticipating that I won't be on the show tomorrow. So we'll have a mailbag. Trevor and Sean will do a mailbag. If for some reason my surgery goes a little better than expected, or I feel better afterwards, I may join the show, but we'll see. And then Friday, we'll have some topics, and we'll rank the defensive position groups on Friday. So I'm looking forward to that, Trev, very, very much. But let's get rocking and rolling. Marcus Freeman spoke today. Head coach Marcus Freeman spoke today to the media. There was I've been very critical of the media questions about Marcus Freeman, and of course there were some today, but I thought overall there's people brought it today. The media is in mid-spring form. There's some very good questions that were brought up today. And so we had a lot of good things to talk about, Trev, and of course it begins with, Coach Freeman updating the injuries at Notre Dame.
Yeah, when he kicked off his press conference today, he covered two injuries. The first one was Jason Onye. Now, none of these are season-ending injuries, so if you're just now tuning in, don't worry. This isn't a doom and gloom type of segment. It's just a little recap. So first one that he talked about was Jason Onye, who had surgery on his hand.
Yep.
And so he is going to be out, I believe, for the duration of spring, Brian. That's kind of
the way he said he doesn't know, but it sounds like it from the people that I've talked to. It sounds like there's no need to bring him back. He was having a great spring. And the reality is Jason's had great springs like each of the last 3 years. Like Jason dominating. Reading between the lines based on some things I've been told, it sounds like this is something he probably could have just like wrapped up and played with if we're in season. But he was having a great spring. They want to get a lot of the other guys some reps. Jason's been playing, had been playing great for the first few practices. They're just like, hey, let's just do it now, clean it up, and he'd be good to go. I think they would have treated this one probably a little bit differently if we were in season. Just kind of reading between the lines on it, but nothing major. It was a very small thing. He didn't even say definitively that he would be out for the rest of the spring. I've been told he probably will, but if he isn't, it really doesn't matter. It's an opportunity for a lot of young guys to get some reps, but I think the staff is pretty confident knowing Jason Onye knows what to do. It's just about can they get him to, out in the fall and get him to play at the level he did the last 6 games of last season and the first 5 of the 2025 season. He was, we were having this debate in 24, Trev, like when he got hurt, was he their best defensive tackle at that time? And then obviously lost a lot of development time and got off to a slow start in 2025. But when it clicked, boy, the last 6 games, it clicked. And I've had some people kind of push back anytime you talk about something over the second half of the year. They're like, yeah, I didn't play anybody. They played USC and Navy. Those are 2 pretty darn good offenses. And he played great against both of them. And Pitt,
Yeah.
Pitt's a pretty good football team. So I think this notion that they didn't play anybody on defense, I think you could make a better case that some of the offensive success we could take with a little bit of, because the last 6 teams, none of them had good defenses, but they played 3 pretty good offenses down the stretch. And Jason Onye played really good football in those. And so minor thing, didn't sound like it was anything serious. Nick Reddish's injury was a little bit more serious, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was. He gave the update that he needed surgery on a labrum injury that he suffered. And he did go as far to say that they hope to get him back for the start of fall camp. So here's to hoping that, his road to recovery goes by smoothly. There's no setbacks along the way because he was off to a really hot start in spring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun to watch him, and it's, class that we've argued is the best recruiting class in the country. On 3 Rivals has them as the number 1 class. A lot of people say, oh, they're number 2. No, that's the industry ranking where they combine everybody's ranking, and then they have their own, and in their own ranking, Notre Dame was number 1. And I tend to agree with that assessment. So when you have that kind of class and one of your lowest ranked players, actually a couple of your lowest ranked players are amongst your best that you've seen so far, that's a great sign. And I'm referring to Nick Reddish on defense and then Sullivan Garvin on offense. I'm going to mess that up so many times over the next couple of years between Sullivan Absher and Sullivan Garvin. But when those 2 guys are some of your better players, you're like, okay, and now I'm really excited about this recruiting class because some of the guys that aren't getting a lot of love are performing well. But now he looks so comfortable playing the slot, Trev, and and that was the position they kind of primarily recruited him for. Had a really good first day, looked real smooth in the second practice we saw. So that's a bummer for him. But like you said, they said he'll hopefully be back for the fall with a labrum tear. I'll be honest with you, I am a little concerned about the number of labrum injuries we've seen at Notre Dame. The guys that are out right now with labrum injuries, and then now another one. I don't know that it's anything. Can't tell you why. It's not like Laura Orlando sucks. I don't know the reason for that. I can just say that it does seem a little bit higher than normal. And hopefully that's something that the Notre Dame medical staff and strength staff and football coaching staff are at least discussing. It could just sometimes, Trev, it's bad luck. Sometimes it's just, guys get into unfortunate situations. And that may be it. I'm simply saying that in a situation, it's kind of like being bad on third down of the red zone. When you're not good at it, you look at it and you try to identify what the reasons are and address it. And sometimes it's, bad luck. Sometimes it's, we had good calls, but we dropped too many passes or this or that or whatever. You identify the reasons. And sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, we can fix this. So I hope that's at least something that they look into.
Yeah. You and I feel the same way about it. It's happened enough that now it needs some attention. So I'm with you there completely. But injuries wasn't the only thing that Marcus Freeman covered in his press conference today, Brian. He touched on a bunch of different topics, one of them being the offensive line. And that's something that you and I were both very happy to hear him discuss in today's press conference.
Yeah, man. So basically what Coach Freeman said, he was asked a question about Will Black and then just kind of about the offensive line overall. And what he said was, and this backs up what I had been told, and I'm glad to hear that what I was told is kind of what it is, but he basically said we've had the same first and second group out there. He said the only thing that we've seen differently is he talked about Maddie Augustine playing some guard and tackle. I've also seen that a little bit with Charlie Tom with the third team playing a little bit of guard and tackle. He said, but the most part, guys are where they are. And obviously that's left to right. It's Will Black, Anthony Knapp, Joe Otting, Sullivan Absher, and Gerby Lambert. That's a great thing because one of the concerns I had was Joe Rudolph in the spring has a tendency, and in fall camp really, he has a tendency to he's almost like an NFL offensive line coach where he's going in with like the thought of like, we only have like 8 guys that we can travel with, so I've got my guys got to be interchangeable to a degree, especially backups. And, there hasn't been, in my opinion, enough letting guys be where they are. And one of the things that, for example, that made it tough on Rocco Spindler going into 2024 is like Sam Pendleton, just like they moved him to left guard and kept him there. But with Rocco and Pat Coogan, they kept moving him around every day. It's like we'd go to practice one day, he's a left guard, the next day he's a right guard, the next day he's a center, and there was no continuity. And so then, of course, those guys don't perform as well. And then, of course, Rocco steps into the starting lineup when Billy Shrouth gets hurt. And guess what? He's playing right guard every day, and he plays very well. Pat Coogan finally gets a chance to step into the lineup, when there's an injured Ashton Craig, and he, played consistently solid football, just like he did at Indiana. And they were both better than Sam Pendleton was at the time. Now, I still think highly of Sam Pendleton. It was more of just I didn't agree with the process. It wasn't even a knock on Sam Pendleton. It just was, these are still college kids, and none of them are multiple year starters, and you're moving them around all over the place. And so it was very nice to see that there's some continuity, because the offensive line's returning experience is very good, but also can be a little bit misleading. So you talk about Gerby Lambert's got 12 career starts. Ashton Craig has 12 career starts when you look at the end of 23. Anthony Knapp now has 27 career starts. Sullivan Absher has 5 career starts. So there's 6 guys. Joe Otting started 6 games last year. And so there's a lot of guys that have started multiple games. But if you look at it, the only guy starting right now in spring practice, the only guy at a position where he started last year is Joe Otting. That's it. Because Anthony Knapp's 27 starts were at left tackle. He's now at left guard. Sullivan Absher's 5 starts were at left guard. He's now at right guard. Gerby Lambert's 12 starts were at right guard. He's now at right tackle. And that unit, as talented as it is, needs time to work together. Now, to a degree, you can't really completely work together because there's no Ashton Craig. But you're getting a ton of reps of Anthony Knapp and Will Black together, and Sullivan Absher and Gerby Lambert together, and that's vitally important. And we've seen this throughout the years. Joe Rudolph's tenure and in Coach Jeff Quinn's tenure and in Coach Eastand's tenure. When you don't get a lot of reps with your expected offensive line in the spring, it can create problems. Remember the 2014 offensive line that got off to a rough start and actually finished pretty well. The team sucked at the end, but the offensive line played pretty well. Well, if you go back into that spring, you had like 3 players out that spring. And like Nick Martin was out. I don't remember if Elmer was out, but like Christian Lombard was out. There was there just was no continuity because they didn't have a bunch of guys that spring. So they went out in the fall and they're trying to get work with Elmer at tackle and Lombard at guard because he had missed so much time, and Nick Martin at center and he had a bad hand, and they just couldn't get anything going. You had a first-time, left tackle because Ronnie Stanley had moved from right tackle to left tackle. You had all these different things going on, Trev. And they got off to a really slow start. And then he, moved Elmer back to guard and Lombard back to tackle, put Nick Martin out to left guard, put Matt Hegarty in at center. And as that unit got more time together, they got better. But the reason that it took so much time is because he couldn't work with those combinations in the spring because you were missing so many guys. So it happens to everybody. This isn't a pro-con Joe Rudolph. This is just reality. The more time your offensive line can get together with continuity of what they're doing, playing right-handed versus left-handed, playing inside versus outside, where they can get continuity and get time working together from a communication standpoint, it's going to be better for your line. So for me, this is a great revelation that we got from Marcus Freeman that no, they're pretty much keeping the top guys where they are. And I hope that continues for the second half of spring ball.
You and me both, man. I mean, it's music to my ears when I was able to hear that for a couple of reasons. For one player in particular, somebody that I wanted to watch this staff just plant in one spot and let him grow with Sullivan Absher. Because that kid has moved around to right tackle, left guard, right guard. He played center last spring. But I was very anxious to see what he was going to look like if they were just like, nope, you're going to be the right guard from the start of spring, and if you're healthy enough, throughout all of fall camp. And so far, they've lived up to that 6 practices in. And for the other reasons that you talked about, this is Anthony Knapp's first time at guard. This is Gerby Lambert's not first time playing right tackle, but it's his first time with the first team.
Yeah,
exactly, playing right tackle. So very, very happy about all of that. But the offensive line wasn't the only side of the trenches that Marcus Freeman talked about. He also talked about the defensive line and how they were progressing. And he was very raving about Charlie Partridge and the job that he had done. I think the question was, basically the question was framed, who alongside Boubacar Traore was going to step up along the defensive line? And he was very complimentary to a lot of the pieces. He talked about Bryce Young. He talked about Keon Keeley. Heck, he talked about Bryce Young and Boubacar when he got asked a question about Will Black in his press conference. You know what I mean? Very complimentary.
Go against them every day, yeah.
Heck yeah,
and
man.
Trev, that backs up something that you and I talked about. I had told you, and I think I put it in an intel piece that I thought I did. But I definitely told you for sure that one of the things that we had heard about spring so far was some of the great battles happening between Will Black and Bryce Young, and how that's been a really important part of seeing Will Black grow as they're throwing him right to the fire. He's going against Boubacar and Bryce Young constantly, and Keon Keeley constantly, and I think that's a big part of that development. But no, so what I liked about this, what he said about the D-line, Trev, with Coach Partridge is I like when he says things that backs up what my intel says. And I'm going to have an intel piece hopefully coming out this weekend, and I'm trying to just get a little bit more, sort of like a mid-spring, as they get ready to go on spring break and Easter, a little Easter weekend, I should say. Not spring break, but Easter break is what I meant to say. Kind of where things stand right now. And one of the things I've heard is just how well the defensive line is taken to Coach Partridge. And a lot of times these can turn into like this new coach versus the old coach. It has nothing to do with about that. That it's about how well are they adapting to the new coach. And I've heard a lot of things. And one of the points of emphasis for the Notre Dame defensive line this spring, from what I'm told, is really working on enhancing the pass rush repertoire, which, as you know, is music to my ears. Notre Dame is a very sound, stout defense the last 2 years. But the one thing that I did ask for from Coach Washington, who overall I thought did a very good job the last 2 years, was I want to see an enhanced repertoire from them as pass rushers, to where if Boubacar's speed rush doesn't work, what does he have to counter it? What is Bryce Young? What kind of moves does he have besides just winning on the edge? When you go back and watch the success the DNs have over the last couple of years, a lot of the sacks have been on kind of the same exact move. They just win because they're better athletes, and they play with good pad level and all that, which is good coaching. But I do believe that you're seeing that. And the encouraging thing for me is the first thing he talking about the pass rush was the interior pass rush. The interior push, I think, is what he said. I could be wrong on that, but that was a sight to see. And I'm going to have some interesting nuggets here on this weekend when I put the intel piece together about what some of the non-returning starters that are really turning heads this spring. It was some exciting intel, but yeah, I think that move's going to turn out to be a really, really strong one, really on and off the field, meaning from a recruiting standpoint. And I've been told that the way that Charlie Partridge coaches it's been made for an easy transition from one coach to another. He doesn't have this he doesn't have this kind of demeanor where it can be like when a coach comes in who's new and he's very abrasive, it can work. It's fine. I don't have a problem with it, but it's harder to get used to when you're a player, when you know what I mean? And I've been told that's not really who he is. He's intense, boy. I mean, we see it at practice, Trev. He's intense and gets after it, but it's constant coaching. And I like that, which is a very good thing. So very encouraged. I know you're going to have an article coming out here at Irish Breakdown talking about sort of some of the trenches comments, and that's where it's got to be, man. Marcus Freeman wants to be there, and one of the shows that we're going to do at some point in time are, what are the key ingredients that really go into the national champions in recent years? And the one thing that there's some teams that are great here, but not great here. There's some things where it's like maybe 3 of the last 5 champs had it, but 2 didn't. So it's not really something you have to have. But the one thing that I think you can look back and say about the last 5 national champions is that they all played really well on both sides of the ball in the trenches, all of them. Now, Ohio State didn't always play well on both sides of the ball in the regular season, which is why they went 10-2. But in the postseason, they did. They played really well on both sides of the ball in the trenches. Same thing with Michigan in 23. Same thing with Georgia in 22 and 21. And I think that's a very, very key ingredient. So it was good to hear that.
No, absolutely. I've been waiting to hear him talk about a lot of the trench warfare that's been going on in spring practice, and I'm glad to hear that they're developing and coming along. Another group that is developing and coming along that Marcus Freeman talked about, Sean Stiers actually asked him the question to kind of get this ball rolling here. Was he highlighted the wide receivers? Specifically, he asked around Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams, but then that just kind of branched out into Marcus Freeman talking about just the host of young talent that they have in the room, and a lot of high praise coming from their head coach about that receiver room.
Well, and then you see the video little clip comes out. I wish Notre Dame would do more, than just like one clip, or they don't really give us a whole lot sometimes. But man, that one play that they did put out, they've put out 2 clips today, and they both show one play each. And it's like, can we please just can you just give us a little bit more than that? You're not taking away any secrets, but one was a great deep ball, looked like a slot fade. Might have just been a straight go route, but or a corner route, I mean. But CJ Carr hitting Mylan Graham. And of course, he talks about Mylan Graham. And I've heard that Mike is having a great spring. I've heard Cam's having a great spring. Mylan's having a great spring. Still learning. He's got an adjustment to make, but just playing really well. Elijah's having a great spring. I've heard some really good things about Logan Saldate. And then, of course, the freshmen keep popping too. And he brought up the freshmen. He's like, man, even the freshmen. And a lot of times that's coach speak, just trying to be encouraging to the team. But from what I've been told, that's kind of how it's played out in spring practice as well. There's been some great battles between the first team, between the offensive pass catchers and the secondary, to the point where like Leonard Moore's even getting beat some. Which, some people are like, oh, my God, Leonard Moore's not going to be as good as we thought. No, he's really flipping good. It's just that he's going against a really talented group of receivers, and you're going to win some and lose some. And the receivers are winning a lot more of those battles this spring than they have the last couple. And it's been slowly trending up ever since Mike Brown got here. I mean, it's like dominated early on, and then they've been getting better and better every year as his coaching takes hold and as the talent increases. And that was the first thing that he said was, let's first give some love to Mike Brown for his job of recruiting and development. And he has. Are there things I want to see him do a better job of? Yes, I'm very picky of wide receivers, but I've also said plenty of times they are so much better coached now than what they were before. Way better coached. And not even like that's a low bar. I mean, like if you just put it at a normal bar, they're a very well-coached receiver room. There's some things I want to see them take the next level on, but we're starting to see that. I'm excited for what they're going to see.
Yeah, their one-on-ones have been ultimately competitive in practice. That's some of the things that we saw when we were there. That's a lot of the stuff that you've heard in some of the intel that you've gathered. That makes me feel good. Before we move on to the last point, Marcus Freeman on the first day of spring talked about how since this team is so much farther ahead and the depth of talent on this team, it's going to allow them to do a lot more best on best. And I'm happy that wasn't just coach speak. It's something that they're actually living out, and you're seeing it. You watched Mylan Graham versus Christian Gray on that slot fade or that corner route. We saw it at practice, Will Black going up against, Bryce Young or Boubacar Traore. So looking forward to that continuing as spring goes on. But Brian, the last thing that we wanted to kind of cover that he talked about, obviously Freeman talked about more than this in his press conference. But one of the biggest takeaways that we had was he talked about their playmaking ability. And it was a question kind of geared around CJ Carr, and it just kind of stemmed from there. And talking about how CJ talked about how he's, experimenting with no-look passes and things like that. But Marcus Freeman went on to say that, hey, because of how this team is put together and we have guys that are returning, we got returning coordinators, a returning starting quarterback, and we have a lot of talent, we are kind of letting them fail a little bit in practice or experiment with certain things in practice, because the worst thing that'll happen is your coach gets on you. Your coach gets after you. And that was a very, very promising thing to hear Coach Freeman talk about today.
There's a couple ways you could look at this, Trev. One is, this is growth by Marcus Freeman, allowing a bit more freedom with his football team. And I think there's something to that. I think there's some truth to that. There's, look, like he's evolving. He early on, Marcus Freeman was like, if you threw a pick in practice, it was like the world was coming to an end. Like that was a big concern of his. And I honestly think part of it is that. I think there's growth to that. But I think there's another part of this, Trev, and that is Marcus Freeman not understanding, but Marcus Freeman showing that when I have talent like I have, I'm not going to harness it. And you and I were talking about this before, and the way I see it is when I look at my coaching days, right? Or when I look at, Brian Kelly's teams, Marcus Freeman's teams, I've studied teams around the country. When you have good talent, but not great talent, it's very important that good talent play within the structure of the system. You've got to do it how I'm telling you to do it. We can't afford to do this. You can't afford to try to make a play like that because you're not Lamar Jackson. You're not Josh Allen. You're not Joe Burrow. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that. They can do that. Or, hey, you're not this elite running back. You've got to stay within what we're trying to do. But we started to hear this a little bit last year. This isn't the first time Marcus Freeman has said about Jeremiah, like trying things in practice. There's no way Marcus Freeman allows that in 2022, in my opinion. And we didn't see it. And part of the reason why is, again, young head coach, this is how we got to do it. It's got to be disciplined. It's got to be this way. The other part of it is he has different types of players now than he had back then in 2022. You're going to give CJ Carr a little bit more rope to try things than you are Drew Pine. You know what I mean? And Steve Angeli, with all due respect to those guys, they need to play within the structure of the offense. You've got to throw the ball this way, this timing, this rhythm, where with CJ Carr, you're going to allow him to do a little bit more. You're not going to demand that Jeremiah Love do it by the book every single play, or Jadarian Price to do it by the book every single play, because you've got dudes that can be playmakers. You got to let them loose a little bit. And that includes sometimes knowing that they're going to make mistakes. CJ Carr's aggressiveness is going to result in interceptions in the fall. It just is. You live with that, because it's going to result, for every interception, he's going to have 5, 6, 7, 8 huge plays that you wouldn't have otherwise had if you forced him to play within the structure of the offense all the time. Same thing with, Mylan Graham and Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse and guys like that. You got to give them a little freedom of, hey, once they get the ball, let them work, as opposed to teaching them to just maximize every catch from a yard standpoint, because that's a lot of times going to lead to, hey, just get what you can get. We're not good enough. You're not good enough to do that against Ohio State or Oregon or whatever. Well, now they are. We know Jaden Greathouse can do it. We've seen Jordan Faison do it. We believe Mylan Graham can do it, and we think they recruited a bunch of guys that can do it also. You can't have structure once Bubba Frazier's got the ball in his hands. It's give him the ball and let him cook. And sometimes that's going to be he makes the wrong cut and gets tackled for a 2-yard gain. Other times he's going to make five guys miss. He's on Sports Center for his impressive 50-yard touchdown. And I think that's a big part of it, Trev, I think, Mark, there's a greater appreciation for his talent and letting that talent cook without allowing it to be undisciplined. Because there's a line, and he made this clear, there's a line that you can cross where it's like, okay, now you're just being reckless. And he was very clear about that. And I think it speaks volumes to the talent that he believes he has.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the benefit, I've talked about this before, and since Notre Dame has a defensive-minded head coach, and this is Notre Dame aside, me personally, I always have like hesitations and things that I keep out for when a team is just ran by a defensive-minded head coach. I think of that in the NFL. I think of that at the collegiate level, every level of football, good or bad. And one of the reasons why is because teams that have defensive-minded head coaches, typically their offenses seem to be a little bit more reserved. We talk on this channel a lot about like what you need to do to go win a national championship. One of those is you have to let your playmakers go be playmakers. And that's something that offensively Notre Dame hasn't done outside of, we saw it last year. There were times in 2024 when we saw it, but a lot of it was play within the system, trust your technique, trust your coaching, go out there and execute. And you need those things. It can't just be a free-for-all backyard football. I'm aware of that fact, but I think two things kind of changed that. One, Marcus Freeman getting to watch Jeremiah Love basically do what he did on defenses for 2 straight years. And two, kind of that adjustment that he had on defense last year of, okay, the first couple of games, they were like, okay, play within the system, trust your coaching, trust your technique, and just go out and execute. And they weren't allowed to go be free. And they weren't allowed to go be athletes. I mean, heck, CJ Carr's first passing touchdown of the season was a no-look pass in the rain at night in Hard Rock Stadium against a team that played for the national championship. I think over time he's had to see and like allow those things to happen to say, okay, yeah, this can be beneficial. So I'm very, very happy that he talked about it today in his press conference because, Brian, you've said it before, practice is the time to do it. And what it was either the start of fall camp or the start of spring last year. We were out and like CJ had like 3 passes picked off. One was by a Don, 2 were by Tay Johnson, and everybody's freaking out about it. CJ's turning the ball over. And you talked about it in the practice report. It's like, well, now's the time to do that because I'd rather you do it on day 1 of this practice than against Texas A&M, than against USC. So those are the times to definitely go out and experiment. I'm with you completely. Folks, let's dive into part 2 of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go through and we're going to take a look at Notre Dame's offensive position groups. And like Brian said at the start of the show, this is something that we like to would have done at the start of spring. There's a lot of moving pieces. It's when we just heard that, some players were going to be sitting out. So now that we have about a 6 practice sample size, or that they're at practice 6, we haven't gotten to see 6. We're going to go through and rank our offensive position groups. And basically how we're going to do this, it's where things are at right now. We're not projecting forward to the season. So it's not, I have wide receivers at number 1 right now because I think that they're going to have a heck of a year. It's where they're at right now. A bunch of different evaluating tools went into these factors, and then we're working 5 to 1. We'll snake these. I'll give one. Brian will give, one of his, and then back and forth. So very interesting conversation. And this was an interesting list to put together, to say the least, I would say, Brian.
A lot harder than we've had in the past. And it was even easier than the defense. The defense was incredibly hard. And we're going to talk about that probably on Friday. But what this basically comes down to, it's a look at where we think the position groups are today. And so when we talk about the tight ends, for example, there's no Ian Premer. We will talk about the running backs, like with the guys that we know will return. But the reality is there's some uncertainty there. And so that's going to reflect on that position group. And so it's really a look at where the position groups are today. It includes talent, depth of talent, experience, all the factors that go into how good a unit is in the present moment. And that's where our rankings come from. And Trev, as usual, our rankings are similar. There was only one difference that we had. And let's get right into that. And my number 5, and it's funny looking back on it, because like Loose Emoji and I did a couple of these when we were doing shows together back in the day. And I remember one year we were talking about like the running backs, and it was like, I think it was like going into the 2019 season. And it was kind of like, boy, this is a major question mark, because if Tony Jones Jr. goes down, they're screwed. I mean, they're completely screwed. And the gap between like that position group and like tight end or, wide receiver, where they had, Chase Claypool and Cole Kmet and depth and Tommy Tremble, all these guys. It's wild, because like now I'm looking like this is a problem area, it's like, but I that's kind of where it is for me. And I'm actually gonna make a little bit of a change on mine, Trevor. I'm actually gonna go running back number 5 from the list I sent you. The reason I'm going running back number 5 is because of the uncertainty about the injured players. Whereas, when you look at my bottom 2 groups, one is banged up and one is healthy. And so right now, when I'm ranking the position groups, I got to go running backs 5th, because of just the fact that we don't know what Kedron Young's going to look like. I can tell you how talented he is and all this, but I've yet to see him do anything post ACL injury, and not everybody recovers from those things the same way. I need to see Javian Osborne in a Notre Dame uniform. I haven't seen him yet. And we need to see how he's going to be when he comes back. This is the second time he's had a hand injury. You remember his junior year, he had a hand injury that caused him to have to carry the ball in one hand all the time. And so that's a bit of a concern for me. So there's enough of a red flag for me with some injuries. And Aeneas Williams right now is no contact. And that's from an injury that he suffered at the beginning of the 25 season that is now still keeping him out from certain reps. So I think the uncertainty of the room is why they're 5. I think you could make a good case that they'd be higher if everything was healthy and we were projecting into the fall. But just looking at where they are right now, I have to put the running backs 5. And the fact that they're last this year, just like they were in 19, it's funny because it's for very different reasons. It's much more so about just some guys being out, but more so about how good the rest of the offense is. Where in 19, it's like If you lose your one guy, you're screwed. Right now, Notre Dame's out 3 running backs, and we're still like, man, those 2 guys that are still there are really talented. You know what I mean? Like even Xavier Southall's like, man, out of the backfield, Xavier can do some things out of the backfield. You know what I mean? And he's learning the position. It's a different world than what it was when we did this 5-6 years ago. But that's why the running back room is 5 for me right now.
Yeah, my 4 and 5 were very, very, very close. And really, you could make the argument for my entire list being very close, like what Brian talked about. But as much as it pains me to say this, I have the tight ends at 5th for a couple reasons why. First, one of the main players that they are expecting to return, or well, has returned, but expecting to play a big role this season is Cooper Flanagan, who is coming off of an Achilles injury. And we've heard before, it's like, players feel 100%. It's like, that is the healthiest I've felt ever. And it's like, okay, well, I need to then go see it. Some of this is just lack of availability. I've been to one practice, and in that practice, they were just in helmets, no pads, and we didn't really get to see the tight end group do a whole lot. The room is exceptionally talented. But one of the reasons that separated it from what my 4th position group was is nobody has really emerged yet. We've heard a lot of really good things, but unlike my team in the 4th spot, I can look at that room and say, okay, there is one guy in waiting while Aeneas works back to being 100% in full go and while Kedron is still working his way back. The tight end room, it's like, okay, they're seeing good stuff from Jack Larson, who's having his best offseason to date. Ty Washington has reshaped his body. James Flanagan is really coming along. Cooper Flanagan's back healthy. But like Ian Premer's not on campus yet. Arguably your highest ceiling guy in the room. Probably fighting for that spot with James Flanagan. And then it's just like, we don't really know what kind of role they're going to play yet. And so as of today, right now, that's why they're 5th. And it has nothing to do with the talent in the room. None of our rankings reflect the level of talent in the room. To Brian's point about this being a much different conversation than previous years. But for what we know right now, if Notre Dame had to play a game and you were to ask me who their starting tight end was going to be, I don't think I'd be able to answer that question. But if Notre Dame had a game today and you asked me who their starting, receiving core is going to be or who their starting running back is going to be today, I think I'd be able to tell you. So I think for some of those reasons, they're number 5 for me. Brian, who's your number 4?
Who real quick, tight ends, who would be your starter right now at running back?
Nolan James.
Okay. I was just curious where you're going to go with that. I have tight ends 4 because I have seen an extra practice than you. And one of the things that I talked about in that practice was seeing the juice from Cooper Flanagan, like seeing him come off the line. But as much as I like to see that, Trev, what happens when the fatigue sets in, which again is a concern with an Achilles. So the fact that you've got 3 or 5 running backs out is why I flipped it. Because I originally, when we first did this, Trev, without some guidance, I had the running backs 4 and the tight ends 5, just looking at the roster of guys on campus. But the reality is right now, every tight end that's on campus is practicing and is doing some good things from what I've heard and then what we've seen. And so there's more certainty. And again, I don't need to know who the starter is at tight end as much as I need to at running back. So I agree with you. I think there's more certainty of who would be the starter if you had to play a game this Saturday. But to me, it doesn't matter as much to me because of the fact that it's more of an interchangeable position and everybody's healthy. So you can use all of their different skill sets in different ways. But I like what I've seen from the tight ends. I think the fact that everybody's healthy, this is a talented room. I don't think there's as much of the upside talent with what's currently on campus as what's with everybody else. And if the running back room was healthy right now and all 5 guys that are on campus were practicing, this would be a different rankings and the tight ends would be number 5, which again speaks volumes to how loaded this team is. Because the questions we have, Trev, you didn't say, I'm not sure if they have enough of this. I'm not sure if they have enough of that. I'm not sure if they're this or if they're that. You never said that about the tight ends. It's uncertainty about the starter and some guys, James Flanagan's got a lot of talent, but he hasn't really done a whole lot yet. One of the things that was a criteria for where they are now is proven production and experience is going to dictate if I'm more comfortable with Sullivan Absher right now as a football player than I am James Flanagan. If they both reach their full potential, James Flanagan's a better football player than Sullivan Absher. But guess what? I know more of what I'm going to get from Sullivan Absher than I do from James Flanagan because of past experience. And so that factors in as well. And people in chat can say Aeneas will be running back 1. Again, that's fine. You can project that to the fall. But right now, if they had to play a game tomorrow, Aeneas can't play. He can't play. So he wouldn't be the starter. He won't be RB1 right now. And that's it's a projection of, and we had this problem last year. is it's about where they are now. Because what if Aeneas gets hurt again? We don't know that he's going to be 100% in the fall because we haven't seen it. And this is an injury that's now been going on since August for him, actually since before August, because he showed up to fall camp with that injury. And so you can't just convince yourself that, oh, he's going to be fine until you see him be fine. And that was the deciding factor for me of why I had the tight ends 4 and the running backs 5. But I still think it speaks volumes to where if you had to go into a game tomorrow with a 1-2 punch at running back of Nolan James Jr. and Jonas Walton and a tight end room of Cooper Flanagan, James Flanagan, Ty Washington, Jack Larson, and Preston Frizel, I'd be like, all right, cool, let's roll. That's a talented group. Now, depth would be an issue for a long season and all those type of things, but we expect the depth to be figured out. But that's still a very talented group of players, which is, as we'll continue to say, is why we're so excited about this offense. But that's why I have tight end 4 and running back 5. And there's some distance between those two and where everything else I have on the roster.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's for some of the reasons that you laid out, that's why I have running back at number 4. There was some very, very close battles in here, but some of it for me was just looking at, okay, if they had to play a game today, who I could not confidently tell you who was going to start at tight end. Now, the flip side, which you brought up, is you might not have to name a starter because a lot of the skill sets are interchangeable, which is totally fair. But I
Especially
know
with
my
Flanagans. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, absolutely. But then some of the hesitations, like why it was so close for me, it's like, well, I haven't seen Cooper Flanagan play a game of football since 2024.
Right.
I watched James Flanagan come in as a blocker. I watched Ty Washington catch his first pass as a, tight end from QB1 in November. But then in the flip side of that coin, I've seen Nolan James play in a game in like meaningful minutes. So like a lot went back and forth. Some of that came to Aeneas isn't working his way back from a season-ending injury, like in the same light as Keedron Young. What's up?
Sure. I agree with that, but like my whole point is if they were going to play a game today, Aeneas wouldn't play.
Yeah, totally.
When did Nolan play meaningful snaps?
Well, he did last season. I don't think he did.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. You said Nolan played meaningful snaps last year. Did you mean Aeneas?
No, I said in the flip side of what I was trying to say, if I didn't say it, in the flip side of my argument, Nolan James also hasn't played meaningful snaps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's like in my argument with tight ends, it's like, well, I haven't seen that really from Cooper Flanagan in a year and a half, but then Nolan James hasn't yet in his collegiate career. So,
and that's what makes it tough with these two groups. I mean, it is that we have seen Ty Washington play meaningful snaps, but that was as your number 2 tight end, not as your guy.
Yep.
Let's get into number 3, Trev. Who's your number 3 group? Because I struggled a little bit with 3 and 2. I really had a tough time for 3 and 2, and I'm very curious to hear. We have the same ranking, but I'm very curious to hear why you put 1 at 3 and at 2, and if it was similar to why I did.
Yeah. So my 2 and 3 were very close, but probably for different reasons than what your 2 and 3 are, because our 1 and 2s are different. But wide receivers are 3rd for me because the skill in the room is exceptional. But I think they have a little bit of room to go before they get to where my number 2 group is. It's like you have Jordan Faison, fantastic. Jaden Greathouse is just kind of continues to be this conundrum, I guess would be the best way to talk about it. It's like, on the 2 biggest stages that you played in 2024, dude balls out and goes absolutely nuts. You could argue the 4 biggest stages that Notre Dame played on in 2024. Texas A&M on the road, Louisville at home, and then obviously the Orange Bowl in the national championship. He went absolutely crazy. And the culmination of his season ended with having over 300 receiving yards, over double-digit receptions, and 3 touchdowns in the final 2 games of the playoffs. Then 2025 comes. He's hampered by injuries. In his interview, he's talking about how he felt back to 100% or as close to 100% after USC, but then there are some conflicting things there. He still didn't play after USC because they made the decision to hold him out. So there's a whole bunch of things that went on there. Talent is not a question with why I have wide receivers at 3. But I think they have a little bit of a ways to go before it's like I can move them any higher than that because of the 2 position groups above. Love what I'm hearing about Micah Gilbert in the spring. I've loved what I've heard about Micah Gilbert the last 2 springs. Yeah. So I need to see that more move. Because
you weren't here. You weren't here his freshman year. To your point, you weren't here the spring of his freshman year. You didn't get hired till that fall.
Correct.
So you weren't here that spring. He was killing it in the spring his freshman year too. So for me, it's 3. I'm not correcting you. I'm saying for me, it's 3 years we've been hearing him play well in the spring. And now it's just it's time to take that in the fall. Trevor, I'm complete with your point. I have receivers number 3. If we were taking out any context and just saying, what's the overall talent on the roster? Forget experience, proven production, just talent and depth of talent. You could make a case that receiver could be number 1. I'd still probably put him number 2, but you can make a case that they're number 1 because I think the 7th or 8th best receiver, I would argue, is better than the 7th or best offensive lineman. My counter would be, I'll talk about the offensive line in a second, but it's the lack of proven production. And yes, Jaden Gray, I mean, which is a weird thing to say because your leading receiver from 2024 comes back and your leading receiver from 2025 comes back, and it's 2 different guys. But to your point, one of those 2 guys is coming back off a year in which he caught 4 passes because he dealt with a hamstring injury, and he's not 100% right now because he's dealing with a hamstring injury. So, like, that's a little bit of a red flag. Mylan Graham has loads of talent, but he's got 6 career catches in 2 years. Micah Gilbert's got loads of talent. He's got like 9 catches in 2 years. Cam Williams, I think he's the most talented kid on the roster. He's got 1 career catch. And Quincy Porter is not in the conversation right now because he's not practicing. He's out. And so when I look at that, I say, okay, that's why I can't put the receivers higher, even though you could make a case that 1 to, top to bottom, they're the most talented room. You can make a case for them in number 1. The reason that I put them behind quarterback is I have way more faith in the depth in the receiver room right now than I do the quarterback room. Way more faith. But the gap between them and the trust I have in CJ Carr compared to the best receivers is also pretty substantial. And that's why I have the quarterbacks number 2, Trev, is because CJ's talent plus his proven production plus his leadership is such that I have more faith that he's going to go ball out this year than I do the receivers. Like I know that Jordan Greathouse can do, or Jordan Faison can do what he did last year. Now I need to see him prove that he can kind of take that step up. With CJ, it's more about just keep what you're doing at a higher volume of opportunity, but like just repeat the performance you had last year. And if you can do that, then you're gonna be a big time football player. So those are the things I look at of why I put them number 2. But I originally had quarterback 3, Trev, because I'm still legitimately concerned about the backup position right now, and it's a battle. But I don't know if you saw it, Trev, but you might want to go look at it while the next time I'm talking. They keep putting out these new 1-clip plays. They've put out 3 now of these little 1-clip plays. The latest is a beautiful back shoulder throw that Noah Grubbs threw to Devin Fitzgerald, who made a one-handed grab with it to beat Chaz Smith. It was in very good coverage. So I love the talent in the receiver room, Trev. Love it. It's just when you're separating great positions, what's the thing that differentiates them from each other? And with me, the quarterback and receiver, it's just the proven production in the starting room is there, where beyond Faison, you say, well, Greathouse has X number of catches and all that. That very true, but I need to see that he's healthy and that he's back. And that's the thing for me. So when I talk about him, man, this is the deepest receiver room I've ever seen at Notre Dame. Just pure talent-wise. But there's still so many questions that these guys have to answer, and that's what was a separator for me. And having the quarterbacks number 2, I know you have a different number 2. I'll let you dive in a second, Trev. But like that, it was number 1 was pretty clear to me after I put my list together and then was like, okay, what's the factor? So I went with my gut. What's the factors that go into it? And then experience, depth, and all that. And then I very quickly, easily changed my number 2 and my number 1. Then the battle was who's 2 and who's 3, because the talent is really good. And even the talent at quarterback is very good. It's just in my concern there isn't that I don't think Blake Hebert's very talented. I do. My concern there is not that I don't think Noah Grubbs is talented. I do. I mean, we've been banging on the Noah Grubbs is not getting enough respect from Notre Dame fans and national people and media people since he signed. I mean, even before he signed. It's just I get more nervous about a freshman quarterback than I do a freshman receiver. You know what I mean? An unproven quarterback is concerning to me. An unproven receiver doesn't mean a hill of beans to me. They're very different positions. And that's what separates the two for me. Both of them are extremely talented, but at least one has sort of that, proven Heisman candidate type of player, and the other one doesn't.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I understand the rationale completely, putting quarterback over wide receiver. One, I have the same ranking, but two, it's because CJ's tied for, the Heisman favorite on FanDuel right now. So I understand that rationale completely. My number two, I'm going with the offensive line, and my 1 and 2 were very, very close because the depth conversation is probably the biggest separator between the two, between the depth in the quarterback room and the depth in the offensive line room. But I went with offensive line number 2 for a couple of different reasons. One, the talent is exceptional, absolutely exceptional. And I think you could argue that they might have the deepest talent on the team once you factor in how Sullivan Garvin has been playing, Grayson McHugh's been turning heads. You still got guys like Peter Jones and Christopher Tarrick waiting in the wings. And we're finally going to see an offensive line group that kind of mirrors what we've been wanting to see from the Notre Dame starting offensive line. And all of those things are true. The thing that separated it for me and the reason why I have them at 2 is actually for a reason that you brought up during when we were talking about Notre Dame's press conference. Like, the experience is phenomenal. But Anthony Knapp has 27 career starts, 0 of them at left guard. Gerby Lambert has 12 career starts, 0 of them at right tackle. Sullivan Absher has 5 career starts at right guard. Will Black has 0 career starts at left tackle. Right. So right now, really, your most experienced guy who's going to be starting in the same spot that he started throughout the time of his career is Ashton Craig, who we kind of can't really factor into this because he's.
Right. I basically counted Joe Otting as the starter at center for the context of the discussion that we're having here. Because again, it makes for a fun discussion. It makes for a more interesting discussion to talk about where they are now, as opposed to what we think that they'll be when this guy comes back, and we think he's going to be this, and we think he's going to be healthy, and we think he's going to be that, and we think he's going to be that. When in reality, I'm hopeful that Ashton Craig looks every bit as good as he did before his second season-ending knee injury. But we don't know that until we see him be that. And that's why, you have to take into account those things, because the point of this is not to project. That's the whole point, Trevor, right? Like, the whole point of this is of a current ranking of where things stand now is to look at it for what it is, not what we think it will be. And that's what this ranking is all about. It's a present, sort of like I'm trying to think of the word, but like a where are you now, not where you might be. It's kind of like the recruiting grades. It's like I have the grade for what you are now and the upside grade. And that's the difference between the two.
Yeah, well, absolutely. One of the reasons why I have the offensive line at number 2 above receiver, above running back, above tight end is because I think that this line today, not even projecting forward, their ceiling is exceptionally high today. But there's still some developmental pieces that still have to continue going on, with Joe Otting taking that next step as the starting centers, Will Black continuing to learn and to grow as a redshirt freshman starting at left tackle, is Anthony Knapp still getting acclimated to his new position. Now, I don't make as much of that as what some other people do. Like it's a completely new spot. It's like, what? To varying degrees. He's not playing defensive tackle now. He's moving a spot over. So
nor is he moving to center, quicker, which would be a harder thing to learn.
Right. And so there are some things that I still have to see with them as spring goes on. So right now I have them at number 2. They very quickly could move up to my number 1 if some of the developmental things happen. But today I have offensive line at number 2.
Go ahead and talk about your number 1, Trev, and then I'll just finish up with my number 1. I think it just flow better since you're kind of comparing like why the O-line was 2 compared to why you have the quarterback 1. I'll just let you kind of rock that one out, because I think that gives proper context to that. Where my debate was more of 2 to 3, yours was more 1 and 2.
Yeah. The biggest separator for me, and here's the thing that's so tough about quarterback in general. That is the one, you could argue offensive line, probably offensive line as well. But the quarterback is the one sole position on offense that you don't want to have to go to your depth for, which is such an interesting dichotomy between like running backs. Like, yo, look at this rotation. Like, man, you got Aeneas and Nolan and Kedron and Javian and Jonas and wide receiver room. It's like, yeah, Mike Brown's going to have a 6-man receiver rotation, but dude, it could be 9 guys if he wanted it to. I want there to be one quarterback all year long. That's not a slight at Blake Hebert. That's not when Riley Leonard was the starting quarterback. I only wanted to see Riley Leonard. When Sam Hartman was the starting quarterback, I only wanted to see Sam Hartman. When CJ's the starting quarterback, I only want to see CJ. So that's what makes this conversation so tough for me, because it's like the depth is a factor, because what if CJ goes down? Then you're relying on Blake Hebert and Noah Grubbs, versus if Sullivan Absher goes down, what happens if Charles Jagasaw is healthy? You got Christopher Tarrick, you got Peter Jones. So that conversation is exceptionally valid. But when I look at the top, as of today, I'm comfortable in saying that CJ Carr is our best returning offensive player, and I don't know if it's overly close. And that is not a slight at the other talent on that roster, believe me. But that is a major, offensively.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think it's. You could argue that there could be one other guy that could get drafted higher than him at some point in time, but that's unlikely. Like, you could argue that maybe Gerby or Will Black ends up being a number 1 or overall 2 pick, and then CJ gets drafted behind like Arch and Dante at 3.
Right.
But that's more down the road a little bit. So I was like thinking like, oh, cool. He's their best player. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
And so for the confines of this conversation, if we're talking about today, CJ Carr is their best offensive player. And in my eyes, when you're talking about a position group that you don't want to see the depth unless you absolutely have to, that was kind of the separator for me. So that's why I have them at 1. Offensive line is number 2. But in a perfect world, if we were allowed to, I'd go 1A, 1B, and then I'd start talking about receivers.
Yeah, that's where I think that I'll end up being when we get down to where I have a little more faith in the depth is 1A, 1B. But the reason that I go with it is because, look, not playing your starter is a part of football. And we've talked about this. CJ last year in 2024, that was the first time that Notre Dame had gone through an entire season with the same starting quarterback that didn't miss any time for any reason since, I believe, 2020. Right? Because Jack Cohn got knocked out of the Virginia Tech, or she got benched in this Virginia Tech game, got knocked out of the Wisconsin game, and got benched against Cincinnati. And Tyler Buckner in 2022 goes down in the second game of the year for the regular season, doesn't come back to the postseason. 23, Sam Hartman. There was a game he got knocked out of. I just can't remember when it was, I thought, but he definitely didn't play the bowl game. And then in 2024, Riley Leonard gets knocked out in the second quarter of the Penn State game, comes back in the third quarter, thank goodness. But had that injury happened earlier in the half, he would have missed more time, just for concussion protocols, period. And so those are different things that you look at and say, I have to factor in the depth. Whereas if you have to go to your backups on the offensive line, there's just a little bit more, to me, confidence in where those guys are. That's not the only reason for me. And Trev, I have CJ Carr as a 5-star player. I think he's an elite talent, but there's 2 starting offensive linemen for Notre Dame that also were 5-star players on my board, and not just mine. So you can say, oh, you're a homer. Okay, cool. On 3, even ranked him as 5 stars. That's Will Black at left tackle and Gerby Lambert at right tackle. The reason that I don't get as concerned about guys moving positions is like Gerby actually practiced has actually practiced more at right tackle than he did at guard, because he practiced his whole freshman year at right tackle and then began the season last year playing right tackle, and then they ended up moving him inside. He just hasn't, and even last year he played it in a game. He had like 10 snaps at right tackle against Purdue and 1 snap at left tackle against Purdue, which we've joked was the cleanest looking pass set we saw all season from a left tackle. But it's more of a praise of Gerby than it is a knock on Anthony Knapp. And I just think for Anthony Knapp, having seen him in 2 practices, I think the transition to guard has been very smooth for him. Very smooth for him. And so I'm just not overly concerned about it. But I love the experience. I love that they've seen this together. I love the size of this unit. I mean, when you look at you got a left tackle now you went from 6'4" and barely 300 pounds to 6'7", 315. You look at the right tackle position, you went from 6'6" and barely 300 pounds, and 300 pounds that caused a guy to get stiff and lose his athleticism, to 6'7", 325, and that 325 is down 10 pounds from what he was in the fall as the starting right guard. He was in the 330s. Your right guard is 6'7", 325. Your left guard is again, not the biggest guy in the world, but he's no smaller than what Billy Schrouth was last year. He's 6'4", 6'5", 304. He's not 6'5". He's like 6'4" and some change. The rounding that they did in the roster this year for the spring was bizarre. But like that, he's a pretty good sized kid. And then even Joe Otting at center is listed at 6'4", 305. And those are your small guys. And so I love the talent here, even not even counting Ashton Craig. But even you look behind it. Grayson McHugh was a guy that I gave a 5-star upside grade to. Matty Augustine's a very talented player. Peter Jones is a guy that I had as a 4-star recruit coming out. Christopher Tarrick is actually, I didn't have as a 4-star. He's been better than what I thought he was going to be. Cam Herron's got some talent. And then, of course, the freshman class that's already making an impact, as I mentioned, Grayson McHugh, but Sullivan Garvin, who's been really impressive. So I put tight end offensive line number 1 because I think there's even more experience there than you have at quarterback. Yes, CJ started all year last year at quarterback, but so did Gerby Lambert. And going from right guard to right tackle doesn't negate that for me. It's not as big of a change if he was like flipping from left tackle to right tackle. Because now you're completely switching your eyes, you're completely switching your hand placement, all that stuff. And Knapp going from left tackle to left guard just doesn't ding the position for me at all. It's fair to do so. It just, for my calculations, didn't. And when you consider the fact that, quarterback position has a future top 10 NFL draft pick, and I'm like, yeah, but the offensive line might have 2 in the starting lineup, which is unfair because there's only 1 quarterback. There's 5 offensive linemen, but that's the reason why. And then just the fact that it all starts up front. Like if CJ goes down and the offensive line is as good as we think it can be, they're going to have a bigger impact on the team than if CJ starts, but 3 of the starting offensive linemen go down or they struggle. And that factored into it as well, of why I have the offensive line number 1. But I do think, Trev, it's way less it's way less certain now than it was before with these, which can be a bad thing or a good thing depending on what the reasons why. I think in this instance, the reasons why are positives. It's a little harder to because, man, you're deciding. We just had a group that had Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse, Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, Mylan Graham, Logan Saldate, Elijah Burris, Kadon Finley, Bubba Frazier ranked 3rd. We just had a group that has James Flanagan, who was a top 100 recruit for me, Cooper Flanagan, who was a 4-star recruit, Jack Larson, who's a 4-star recruit, Preston Frizel was a 4-star recruit, and Ty Washington, who's the most experienced guy at the position based off just last year. We had them 4th on my ranking and 5th on yours. It's like it starts to get exciting when you think about it, Trev. And this is why the expectations are so much higher for Notre Dame now than really they have been. Because even when Notre Dame was 5th going into Marcus Freeman's first year, they've been ranked as a top 5 team preseason in what? So what was their preseason ranking I know they were ranked in the 6. Top 5 in 2022. So they've been in the top 5 before. They were 6 last year. They were top 10 the year before. Expectations have been high. But there's a different buzz about this Notre Dame team, even nationally, than there is now. And I think a big part of that is because of the recognition of the talent that permeates this team without the lack of knocks. That could be a problem. When you've looked at Ohio State in 24 and Georgia in 21 and 22, Bama in 20, LSU in 19, Clemson in 18. When you look at those great teams that won championships and you look at the teams that are usually contending for it, there's not as many, boy, they're really good there, but this and this could be a problem. And that's where Notre Dame was for a lot of years. They're really good here, and here, but this one position could be a problem. And I think that's what separates this Notre Dame team from some past Notre Dame teams.
100%. Look at the conversation that we had just with the offensive line. Going into 2025, a lot of the conversation was, is there a next level for Anthony Knapp? We don't know. Is there another level for Emil Wagner? We don't know because we're not watching them practice right now. You know what I'm saying? The conversation in just the offensive line is different. It slowly transitioned from, in a matter of a year, it went from, have they reached their ceiling to, oh my goodness, how good can this unit be? And that is a heck of a spot to be in. Heck of a spot. Ron, on the next part of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're actually switching gears. We're talking some recruiting. And like with a lot of things, a lot of people can get swept up in, what On3 says, what 247 Sports says, what ESPN has somebody. It's how many 5 stars, how many blue chip. I mean, how many times did we see the graphic last year during the week of the national championship game, the blue chip ratio between Miami and Indiana and who has what, who brings what to the table? Well, as good as it is to load up on 5 stars and blue chip recruits, every class needs those underrated prospects that end up being impact players. And Notre Dame has had a lot of that, especially in recent seasons. Heck, there's a lot of those on the current roster right now, a roster that you and I believe is top 3 in the country talent-wise, and they're not 3rd. So you need those type of players, and that's what we're going to talk about in this segment here.
Yeah, and look, sometimes it's me. It's my ranking that a guy is underappreciated, underrated. I've said this before. I had Aeneas Williams as one of the lowest ranked players in the 2019 recruiting class. I was not high on Williams. I thought he was a heck of a high school player. You can't deny the stats. He was like 4,000 yards rushing and 2,000 yards receiving, but you're like, kids from like out in the middle of nowhere in Missouri. And I don't and wasn't even as explosive and fast as what Aeneas Williams is. And so I was like, heck of a high school player, but I just don't know how well that translates. I think he could be a nice back, but I never saw a back-to-back 1,000-yard season coming from Aeneas Williams. So he's an example of that too. And not even just throwing shade at you idiots at On3 and 247. I do a lot of that, deservedly so, but they're not the ones that are the only ones that get it wrong. We can get it wrong too. And when you look at this, Trev, and it's the same old star debate, right? Like I'm having this debate on somebody on the board, and just the narrow-mindedness of these people that have these stars matter debates and want to act like, oh, well, this guy's a 3-star, so he's not good. I'm like, well, that's a silly thing to say. And then they start throwing out, yeah, but percentages based on, I'm like, who cares about percentages? Watch the freaking film. Stop asking someone else to tell you whether a kid is good or not. So then you point to Leonard Moore, who we've talked about before. On3 thought wasn't even a top 40 cornerback nationally. He wasn't even a top 50 player in Texas nationally coming out. Right? And you need guys like that. Not, and this isn't a look at, hey, these are guys that, are going to be really good role players. Some of them are, but it's more about these are guys that we think are very underrated or underappreciated by the national media. And guys that we think are going to have a chance in college. And some of them I think Notre Dame is going to get, and some of them I don't. They're still on the board, but I don't. Because here's kind of the thing that I'll point in common. So we all agree that Notre Dame has one of the top rosters in the country, right? I even think, so right now in the chat, we've got 2 Ohio State fans, an LSU fan, and a Miami fan in the chat right now. I would be willing to bet you that even they all agree with the statement I'm about to make. Notre Dame has one of the 3 to 5 best rosters in all of college football, and they're not 5. To steal from Trev's thing. Would everybody agree with that right now? That they're a top 5 roster in college football right now? Right? But here's a little something for you. What do Leonard Moore, Adon Schuler, Tay Johnson, Boubacar Traore, Jason Onye, Francis Brew, DJ McKinney, Jordan Faison, Aeneas Williams, Anthony Knapp, Ashton Craig, Sullivan Absher, Cooper Flanagan, and potentially Micah Gilbert all have in common? 2 things. 1, right now they're projected starters at Notre Dame. 2, they were not top 200. They were not top 200 recruits coming out of high school. So we're looking at it and saying that's a lot. That's like over half your starters were not even considered top 200 players. But we're not calling this Notre Dame team a try-hard team. Here's some more players that fit this mold. Joe Alt, Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison, Riley Leonard, Jack Kaiser, Riley Mills, Isaiah Foskey, Kyron Williams, Howard Cross, Maris Leafow, Jarrett Patterson, Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah, Kurt Heinisch, all just from 2020 to now that aren't currently on the team were guys that were not ranked as top 200 players coming out of high school. And a lot of those guys, like Leonard Moore, were 3-star prospects. Jason Onye was not even ranked in the top 700 coming out of high school. So you look at it, and I'm using the consensus composite rankings. Like Anthony Knapp was ranked really high by On3. He was a top 100 player, but overall, he was ranked lower. because others had him as a 3-star. And so that's what you look at and say, there comes a point in time where you got to stop giving a rip about stars. But this is not what this show is about. This show is about guys that we look at that we think have talent that aren't ranked where we think they should be. And that's the point of what we're going to do here today. And every class has them. Those guys that you're like, dude, I love this kid. I know he's not ranked real high, but I think this kid's a really good player. And there's been plenty of guys like that we've pointed out on the show. I mean, everybody remember I was on the Benjamin Morrison train before. There were 3 people that beat me to the Benjamin Morrison punch. 3. It was Mike Mickens, Nick Saban, and Jimmy Lake. That's it. You know what I mean? Like, those are the 3 guys that beat me to the Benjamin Morrison punch. You know, we were very high on Leonard Moore. You know, I was bummed we didn't get to see a lot of his senior year, but we loved that pickup when they made it. Who are some of those guys in this year's class? And that's what we're going to do, Trev. And we're going to talk offense and defensive guys we like, but we're going to talk first and foremost, Trev, about a couple Notre Dame commits that I think are very underrated players. And guess what I'm not talking about? I'm not talking about Xavier Hassan because he's a top 50 player already. We're not talking about Ace Austin, who's a top 100 player. There's some guys that you know, from the media standpoint, are very well appreciated. There's 2 guys in particular, Trev, that we're going to talk about that I think are vastly underrated. And we're going to have some film playing during this of the guys that we're talking about. We're not going to break the film down, but just to give you guys a chance to watch a little bit of film while we're talking about some of these players. And the first guy we're going to talk about is a player that's only been committed for about a week, and that's Lathan Wissington.
Yeah, this is an exceptionally talented running back. He's somebody that has a very, very high ceiling. Very, very much looking forward to seeing what he can do in a Notre Dame uniform. But again, Brian, we said this at the time when he committed. Very, very underrated player. He's not thought of highly enough, and he absolutely needs to be. You know what I'm saying? I mean, when we talked about his recruitment, very explosive player, great vision, smooth athlete. I love watching him.
Yeah. I mean, and you look at his ranking, Trev, and I honestly kind of get a chuckle. Look, he's ranked like number 171 by On3. That's still way too low. But 247 and ESPN have him as a 3-star, which I think is absolutely bonkers. And here's the thing. He plays in 6A football in Texas. He doesn't play like in some little podunk, you know, doesn't play anybody town. Like, he's playing against other Division I football players. Right. And he's averaging 9.1 yards per carry as a junior. This is a big-time football player. Power. He's listed at like 5'11", 190. I talked to some people. His measurements at Notre Dame were tall. He's taller than that and thicker than that. And he looks it. I mean, you just could see it when he was standing next to Marcus Freeman. Like, this is a big kid. Like, Marcus Freeman is not as big as he was when he was playing middle linebacker at Ohio State, but he's still as tall as he was then. And he's still a pretty put-together dude. And you're like, dude, Lathan's a big boy when you see him, you know? And so I think that he tops my list of this is an extremely underrated player. He grades out as a top 100 recruit for me, Trev, and he's very close to being a 4.5-star recruit, which is that of a top 75 player. He was so of 700 points is the cutoff to make it to, I believe, actually, let me pull that up. I maybe no, it's 4.5. It's 690 points is the cutoff because I grade like 8 different categories. That's the cutoff to being a top 75 player. Lathan Ransom was at 687, and his technique grade was his lowest grade. And his pass game was his lowest grade. And technique was his next lowest grade. Those are things that are more about just usage. I can't give you a high pass grade because I think you can be good in the pass game. I have to grade you on what I see. They just don't use him in the pass game. But when he does, man, like that, and that part of his grade goes up, he jumps immediately into 4.5-star, 5-star status. I think he's that big of a back, that good of a back. I really do. I think he's big time. Big time. I feel a lot about him as I did when I first saw Jadarian Price. Because I said then, I was like, dude, this is a top 100 player. I don't care what anybody says. They eventually came around and put him in the top 200, but they still didn't fully appreciate how good Jadarian was. And now he's going to be at least a top 50 NFL draft pick, if not, you know, a first rounder. And I get the same. They're different players, but as far as like this guy's way better than people think, I get the same vibe when I watch Lathan Wissington. And he, oh, by the way, he's running with all this power. He's also a 10.5 100-meter dash guy.
Yeah. Yeah, for being an over 200-pound kid going into a senior year of high school, he can move. He does not have any issues getting to the next level. Once we start getting into some of these players, folks, that Notre Dame doesn't have a commitment from, we're going to kind of talk about where things stand with Lathan Wisington. It's pretty obvious where things stand between him and Notre Dame right now. Obviously, he committed about a week ago, sitting pretty. The same can be said for the next player that we're getting ready to talk about here, Brian. And that is the younger brother of James Flanagan. We're talking about Richie Flanagan, who was one of the first people to commit in the 2027 class. He's also very overlooked.
He is. And look, right now, when you look at Richie's grade, he's ranked outside the top 300 on the 247 composite. He's ranked as a 3-star by On3 and 247. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think Richie Flanagan's a top 100 player. I don't think he's that. But I think as an offensive lineman, he grades out a lot higher. And I said this when he committed, I actually kind of think his grade could potentially be higher as an offensive lineman than it is as defensive lineman, but you're seeing his defensive film here too. There is no safer commitment in the class right now than Richie Flanagan, whose dad played in Notre Dame and whose brother is currently on the team. And he's a guy that Notre Dame generally wanted. And the thing that I like about Richie is you can name him a 3-star all you want, but how many guys have legit Division I ability on both sides of the ball that are linemen? Legit. He was initially recruited to Notre Dame as a defensive lineman, but there was always the chance they'd move him to offensive line to see depending on how the board shakes out. Well, the board's shaking out pretty good right now. And so now you look at him as an offensive lineman and you see him as like a guard center type of guy. And Raymond asked, could he play center? And I think he can play center. He's definitely got a certain body type that could fit really well at center. He reminds me, he's got kind of like that Sam Mustipher type of body, Nick Martin type of body. That you like there, but he's a tough kid. He's a good athlete for his size. I think his speed will stay the same. His athleticism will remain very good as he puts on more weight. Strong kid, great motor. I think he's a very underrated player. Very underrated player. I think he's a 4-star caliber kid I graded him as a 3.5-star, but I haven't regraded him since they decided to move him to an offensive lineman. If he was still playing on the defensive line, I would not call him underranked. I think his ranking would be about where it is, and I like him. He's a Donnie Heinisch, Kurt Heinisch type of guy as a defensive lineman, which is good. As an offensive lineman, I think his ranking goes up. And now that Notre Dame's looking at him as an offensive lineman, I now view him as an even better pickup than I did even when he was a defensive tackle. And I didn't have any issue with him taking him as a defensive lineman. But you just understood he was going to be a little bit more limited there than he will be as an offensive lineman, where I think he could be a really good football player. I mean, his film's not a whole lot different as an offensive lineman than what Anthony Apps was. He's just not as technically proficient as Anthony was, who just was a little bit more advanced from a fundamental standpoint.
Yeah, and there's a lot of traits that he has that kind of translates to both sides of the ball. But I'm with you. I don't know if Richie Flanagan's ever going to be that top 100 recruit as an offensive lineman, but he will definitely be overlooked. Yeah,
and Flanagan's are strong. I don't know if you've seen that, but James was very, very strong. His daddy was strong, and Richie's very strong as well. He's a good football player.
Quick sidebar, James Flanagan was one of the tight ends that I sat down with the day that we were up at media, and one of the other media guys came up and started talking to him about his younger brother. And James was like, no, he's strong as all get out. I mean, he can absolutely move people. And we had some fun with him. He's like, stronger than you? He's like, well, I wouldn't say that. Little bit older brother kind of came in over the top. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
but James is about to be a sophomore in college, and Richie's about to be a senior. So there's a two-year gap. But wait till Richie gets on the O-line strength program compared to the tight end strength program, and we'll see where this is in a couple of years. But no, he's not wrong. Richie's a strong kid, and when he gets about 20 more pounds under that, he's going to be a horse. I really like him. I really like it doesn't get a lot of fanfare, and partly because it's two legacy commits. That's why I've said a lot of times legacy commits actually get underrated. And I think that's true of the two offensive linemen, because obviously James Halter, the other offensive line commit, his dad played at Notre Dame. And I think he's a little bit underappreciated by Notre Dame fans. Now, he's not underranked, though. He's not on this list because On3 has him as a top 100 recruit, and I think he's a consensus top 200 player, Trev, which is I'm fine, totally fine with that. But one of the services, I'm pretty sure it's On3, has him ranked very high. They have him as it's 247 has him as the number 57 overall player in the country. His lowest ranking's 149. That's totally fair. On3 had him 79 on their composite. consensus ranking is where he had him, but I'm fine with that. The only difference of opinion I have with where he's ranked is they have him as an interior offensive lineman, and I think James Halter absolutely can play tackle and is being recruited to play tackle. That's my only disagreement, but his ranking is fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. Brian, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some guys that aren't yet committed to Notre Dame. First, we'll talk about offensive prospects, and then we'll follow that up with defensive. And the first one on offense, man, there's a couple weeks ago, you and I sat down together and we watched some film, and you were like, hey, have you heard of Cade Cooper? And I was like, no, I haven't, because in my mind, 2027 wide receiver recruiting is Quentin Burrell and Julius Jones Jr. And I was like, I haven't heard of Cade Cooper yet. And we popped on the film, and very, very quickly I was impressed.
Yeah, this kid's got really good film, Trev. Very underrated player. He's ranked as the number, I believe, 227 player in the country by On3. 247 and ESPN have him as a 3-star. He's ranked as the number 402 player in the country on the consensus ranking. That is way too low. Way too low. I'm very high on Cade Cooper. He's got really good size. He's sound technically. There's definitely some things to work on. His urgency, when he shows some urgency, he comes off the line very well. There's some technical things I would definitely work with him on if I was his position coach. Love his hands and ball skills, though. His hands and ball skills are outstanding. And he goes to Malvern Prep, so he's a great student. He's a great fit at Notre Dame. But I love this kid. I think he's a top 100 caliber player, Trev. I really do. And he's ranked as a 3-star. I'm a big fan of Cade Cooper. Big-time football player. And just scratching the surface, Trev. He's having love that hurdle right there. He's having a very good offseason, very good at the 7-on-7 circuit from reports. But I think this kid can play. But the ball skills alone honestly make him not a 3-star. But look at that move off the line. Like that right there, that's a really savvy move. Like look at that quickness coming out of his stance. That's a guy that's almost 6'3", making that move, Trev. Like I'm a boom out of that break. And look at him bend into the opening and throttle down into that area and level off. That's a good feel for the position as well. And that's why I say, like, he's got a good football IQ as well as having just, in my opinion, elite ball skills. Is he a burner? No. Is he gonna have the same 40 time as Jeremiah Smith? No. Because if he had that burner speed, he wouldn't be underrated. But I think he's faster than maybe some of the recruiting services give him credit for. But I think the athleticism, the size, the ball skills, the strength, the competitiveness, his tracking ability are all outstanding. He's a top 100 player for me. Big time top 100 player for me.
Absolutely. He kind of has that Micah Gilbert speed. Doesn't look like somebody that can get, stack a defensive back or anything like that, but he absolutely can. And I echo everything that you said about his ball skills. Brian, let's talk about where Notre Dame is at right now with Cade Cooper.
Yeah, I think they're in a great place right now. I felt like Notre Dame. So somebody told me this, and I don't know if this is true, if it's number one, but somebody said no individual school sends more kids to Notre Dame than Malvern Prep. I was told that by somebody. I don't know if that's true, but I've been told it by enough people that it's definitely a Notre Dame factory just for students. So there's a familiarity here. Plus, a former teammate of his, Peter Jones. Well, actually, I don't know if they were teammates, but another guy that played at Malvern Prep, Peter Jones, is on the roster. They probably weren't teammates because Peter's a junior in college, and if Cade was on the team as a freshman, then they probably played together. But this is a school that's a Notre Dame pipeline out of Pennsylvania, so that certainly helped. He's a high academic kid. Family is very into the holistic approach, right? We don't want just a school that's going to develop as a football player. We want someone's going to develop them on and off the field. That's clearly Notre Dame. And so I think they were in a great place beforehand. And he doesn't seem to have a lot of interest in Penn State, which would have been the only school I would have been remotely concerned about. But the visit he had recently was one that I think put Notre Dame way out in front. There's closing to be done because he's not committed, right? So until a kid commits, like I love that right there. Look at that little curl route where he's about to work inside, but he sees that backer inside. So he settles in and works back out. Like that's a savvy play. Like, look at that. Like I find that window and go back to the football. And nice job by the quarterback too, to put that ball right in the middle of that window and him to go back and get it. But I think Notre Dame's in a great place here with Cade Cooper. Big time pickup. It wouldn't shock me if some of the recruiting services, like I've said this before, I don't think On3, for all of my criticisms, has an anti-Notre Dame bias. If anything, they have a lot of guys ranked higher than everybody else. I mean, if you look at Grayson McHugh last year, he was a top 10 national player by On3. And he wasn't anywhere close to that with everybody else. ESPN had him as a 3-star, and 247 had him as the number 147 player in the country. They had him as the number 6 player in Pennsylvania, and On 3 had him as the number 7 player in the country. It's just that I think they get some wrong. It would not shock me if they ever do reevaluate Cade Cooper. It wouldn't shock me if they end up moving him up even further up the rankings, because they're the only one right now that doesn't have him as a 3-star. So I could see him continue to go up and up and up in the rankings. He's a very talented player.
Yeah, that, and once some of the, the showcases and all that stuff, like the Under Armour showcases, start happening over the summer, I think physically they're going to get to take a look at Cade Cooper, and he's going to start shooting up some boards. I'm with you completely. Let's talk about a tight end, Brian. We're talking about Cooper Terwilliger. Hoping I said that last name correctly, but he is a tight end in the 2027 class, and he is another very, very underrated prospect on Notre Dame's recruiting board.
Yeah, he is. And look, I like Cooper. He's a talented kid. He's not like woefully underrated. It's not like these people are morons. I can't believe. It's just, I think he should be. He's consistently underrated. He's ranked as the number 230. He's ranked between 222 and 240 on the recruiting rankings, and he's ranked outside the top 10 of the tight end position. And this is a very good tight end year, Trev. It's the second year in a row that it's been a great tight end year after some kind of down years nationally. But when I look at Cooper, I see a top 150 guy that's creeping up towards top 100, and he's got a lot of throwback to his game. He's a guy that can line up attached. He can play Y, but he's also athletic enough to where he can not play Y. You can play the H. He can move around. Like he's not just a traditional attached to the Y. It's understandable why he's underrated. He's from South Dakota. I actually get this one. But it's like when you're seeing that right there, like that play doesn't really I'm like, oh my God, look at the power. He's playing against some little kid from South Dakota that I wouldn't recruit to go play Division III football. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to evaluate past that. And I think that dings him a little bit, but you also have to be a good enough evaluator to say, look, I don't care who he's playing against. I can see how fast he's moving. I can see how fast his hands are. I can see how, I don't care who you're going against. Your ball skills are your ball skills. Your ability to track a deep ball is your ability to track a deep ball. And if you're a 4.5, you're a 4.5. You know what I mean? I'm not saying he is. I'm just making a point. So when I see the skill set from Cooper Terwilliger, I see a guy that's a really good player. He's kind of slowly moved up my board also, and he's now my number 2 tight end on the Notre Dame board behind Jackson Dollar. So I could see him shooting up the rankings if teams continue to if the analysts continue to reevaluate him. But I see a guy that's a borderline top 100 player right now, and that's even taking into consideration like having to evaluate the competition that he's going against, which again is an understandable thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Notre Dame does end up landing him and Cade Cooper. There's going to be a bunch of Coopers on this roster. You got Cooper Flanagan, you got Cade Cooper, you got Cooper Terwilliger. Going to be a lot of Coopers to keep track of. But with that in mind, Brian, where does Notre Dame stand with Cooper Terwilliger?
So there's a lot of schools after him. Penn State was and still is in a really good position with him, in my opinion. I think Notre Dame put themselves in that top group, if not at the top, coming out of the visit. He's got a very impressive offer list. I mean, he's got a bunch of SEC schools after him. Alabama's offered him, Auburn, Florida, Georgia have all offered him. Michigan's offered him, and you get schools like that. Tennessee's offered him. Texas A&M has offered him. These schools are going up to South Carolina or South Dakota to offer a tight end. Like, the kid's good. Probably going to stay in the North. Penn State was the leader for a while. I don't know that I'd say that. I'm not ready to say that Notre Dame's the no doubt leader, but at the very least, they're in a 1A, 1B situation with Penn State. They were a little later to the game with him. And I think that's kind of been a factor, but they have made up a ton of ground in a hurry. And that visit he had was big time. And I think Notre Dame made themselves a major player.
Good. It's good to hear. Let's talk about an interesting wide receiver prospect here, Brian, by the name of Trenton Yancey. He's also in the 2027 class. Very intriguing prospect, another underrated player, but a good fit at what Notre Dame has on offense. Yeah,
I really like this kid a lot, Trev. And just to kind of get it out of the way now, he's not a kid that I think Notre Dame is going to get. They're working to get him on campus. I think there's a good chance they're going to get him on campus this spring. Depending on how things are going, he may decide he wants to settle on somewhere. Florida's recruiting him really hard. Mississippi State's on him. And you look at his ranking right now, he's ranked as a 3-star by On3, and he's not even a top 200 recruit. I think this kid's a definite top 200 recruit. I think he's a very underrated player, dynamic with the ball in his hands, as you see, strong build, just the kind of prototypical slot after the catch Z that you love. Look, he's throwing a pass here. I love this kid. Plays big-time football, plays at Duncanville. I believe that's where Keelan Russell, who we're going to talk about in our next segment, played. I absolutely love this kid, Trev. He can work vertical, right? Like, I love slots that can do a lot after the catch. Love them. But you can't just be that, because then teams can just kind of crowd the box against you and say, hey, we're just going to keep everything in front of you. You got to be able to push the ball down the field, or your routes down the field, and Trenton can do that. He's got vertical speed. He's a really good advanced route runner, tracks the deep ball very well, has great hands, can win contested catches, and of course, like I said, he's really good after the catch. And he's a really talented player. He's going to be a big pickup for somebody. I don't think as of today it's going to be Notre Dame, but he's still on their board. But I mean, if he picks Florida, he's still a very underrated player to me. If he picks Mississippi State, he's still a very underrated player to me. And he's got a lot of fun film, and he plays with kind of an attitude, like that I really like. Like he's kind of a prick on the field, and I kind of like that. You know what I mean? I like receivers that are that way. Like, not like bad, but just he's got some swagger. I'll just say that, and I rather enjoy that. But look at him, they're just lining him up in the backfield and saying, let's get our best player of the football.
Yeah, without the recruiting hype, he's got a little bit of Jamar Chase to him. Like, great route runner, really great after the catch, and when he gets the ball in his hands, he's like a running back. Very hard to tackle. I mean, I like this kid a lot. I went and watched some of his film after you talked to me about him, because I hadn't heard about him, and yeah, it's impressive.
You look at him last year, Trev. He carried the ball 31 times for 388 yards and 10 touchdowns. That's 12.5 yards per carry and 10 touchdowns. And they're just direct handing it off to him. Everybody knows he's getting the ball. He also caught 54 passes for 780 yards and 9 touchdowns. So this is a kid that had over 1,100 yards last season on only 85 touches and had 19 touchdowns. So he's a really big time player. I'm a big fan of Trenton Yancey. As I mentioned, no, I don't think right now Notre Dame's going to get him. They're trying hard to get him on campus, but this kid's a really good football player. They beat Allen High School, who's another big-time program, for the state championship. And in that game, he caught 3 passes for 30 yards, but had 7 carries for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll play.
Yeah, that'll absolutely play, Trev. That's in the state title game. So he's a really talented player. Very underrated guy. I don't think he's like a burner. I think that probably hurts him. And from a ranking standpoint, he's 5'11", 6 foot. He's not a 4'4" guy, 4'3" guy. But he's got plenty of speed for me. He's a big time player. Love this kid's film. He's on that, that Brian's list, those guys that I fall in love with as players. He's that guy. He's that guy for me.
Speaking of talented players, let's real quick talk about, as we wrap up, the offensive players that have kind of flown under the radar a little bit. Let's talk about wide receiver Julius Jones Jr.
So this is he's not a sleeper prospect. And you could say, dude, what are we talking about here? Why are you talking about Julius Jones Jr.? He's the number 74 player in the country on the consensus rankings. Here's why. Because 74 is still way too low. There's not one outlet that has him in the top 50, and 247 ranks him as the number 114 player in the country. That is still way too low. Julius is a monster. Like an absolute monster. And I mean, just look at that burst off the line. And I talked to Brian Smith, and you guys all know Brian. You guys have seen him on our show. I would hope you guys watch the Portal podcast. Brian does great work there as well. Check it out. He's doing some Notre Dame stuff as well on his podcast also. So check that out. But Brian is someone, Trev, and this is partly why Brian and I always get along. I tend to be like sort of like with evaluations, like an optimist, and with Notre Dame and stuff like that. Brian tends to be a little bit ultra critical, and that's why he and I like talking ball, because we know we kind of balance each other out. And we're laughing last night, like how anybody could have this kid as a top 100, not a top 100 player, but he saw him this summer at a 7-on-7 event. And the thing he told me is like, he was unguardable. I mean, just unguardable. And this is like a national event where, he's going off. As a sophomore, Trev, he had 12 catches as a sophomore, 12 catches for 185 yards and a touchdown against Bishop Gorman as first game of his sophomore year. So, yeah, he's getting a lot of love. He's a heavily ranked recruit. But the fact that he's not a consensus top 50 player to me is nuts. He's closer to being a 5-star than he is a top 100 guy, in my view. He's a big-time player. Where things stand with him, Notre Dame's still in a great spot. It's Notre Dame and Oregon. Miami's also coming along. I still think Notre Dame and Oregon are his top schools. I like where Notre Dame is at. They just got to keep going. They just got to keep building, keep pushing. But the big thing there is he wants to go somewhere that can produce receivers. And, I think that's the big question with him is that. And if Notre Dame can kind of answer that question, I like where they're at, but there's still a lot of work to do.
We already got the highlight film pulled up. I loved it. Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. Talk about safety Gavin Williams, another underrated prospect in the 2027 cycle.
Yeah, so there's one outlet that has Gavin as a top 100 player, and I'm going to go look and see which one it is. I think it might be 247 has him. It's the one where they're rarely right. They have him as a number 86 player in the country. On3 Rivals and ESPN, On3 and Rivals same, and ESPN have him outside the top 200. Gavin Williams is a flat-out top 100 player. He's on here too, partly because he's one of my guys. There's just those guys that I fall in love with their film, and Gavin is that guy. He's such a prototypical Notre Dame DB. He's long, he's smooth, he's athletic, he's wicked smart, he makes a ton of plays, and he's very versatile. I absolutely love this kid. He's so smooth, Trev, and so smart. Like, he makes this look easy. Just a very talented player. Love his length. Very good student. He's a great Notre Dame fit. Doesn't like talking to the media a ton. Something else I really like. I like about him as an evaluator. I don't love about him as someone who runs a media business. I wish he would talk more. But, he's just a no-nonsense. I'm out here just trying to play ball. I'm not out here trying to, do it for the brand. He's out here trying to play ball. He can cover, as you see there. He can tackle in space. He's rangy, plays with swagger. Super high football IQ, Trev. This is a top 100 player. And the fact that two of the outlets don't have him in the top 100 is bonkers to me. But this is a big-time football player. Absolutely love Gavin Williams. And he plays both sides of the ball. And I love two-way players.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he fits the mold. Despite Mike Mickens being gone, he fits the mold of Notre Dame secondary recruiting really good football players. Not just – he's a really great boundary corner. He's a really great just safety, all-around good football player. I'm with you completely. Where does Notre Dame stand? Oh.
Real quick, I think he could play corner in a zone defense. I do. I think he could play field corner in a team that wants to play a bunch of cover 3 and cover 4. Now, Notre Dame is recruiting him as a safety. I'm simply making the point that he brings some of that versatility as well. I think he could be a nickel as well. I mean, he's a guy that, Dallas Golden was this way. Xavier Hassan is this way. And not quite to their degree, because I don't think he is as good at corner as they could be at safety. But if Notre Dame wanted to be like a pure cover 3 team or a pure cover 4 team, and he was buried in the safety depth chart, but there was a need at corner, I'd say move Gavin. Move him out there to field corner, and let's see what he can do. He's got that kind of ability, Trev, that I would be curious. I wouldn't be surprised if whoever gets him does give him some looks at corner early on, just to work on his man cover skills. But I think when it's all said and done, he's going to be a guy that just does everything well. He makes a lot of plays on the ball. He can play center field. He can play the alleys. He can play man, and he can tackle. As far as where Notre Dame stands, USC, Washington, and Notre Dame, I believe, are the top schools from the people I talked to. I think Notre Dame is his number one school. I believe that's where they are right now. He visited this past weekend. I think Notre Dame solidified their standing with him. Again, more work to be done. I don't think this one's over yet. They've got to show that they can close. I think Aaron Henry's done a tremendous job getting in on guys that were already high on the board. Obviously, to commit Xavier, Hassan, Zay Hassan, Ace Alston, Khalil Terry, but then also some of the guys like a Gavin Williams, who Mike Mickens said was on and had built a good relationship with, you could quickly lose steam with those guys with a position change. And you got to give a lot of credit to Aaron Henry that he's been able to quickly reestablish Notre Dame as that top school with Gavin Williams. Now it's just about, can he get them over the finish line for a couple of these guys? That's really the question mark. I think I'm really impressed with what Aaron Henry's done so far in the recruiting trail. Now we just need to see, can he close? Can he seal the deal on some of these guys? And hopefully Gavin Williams is one of the ones that he can do that on. You give me a secondary that Zay Hassan and Ace Austin and Khalil Terry, and you add Gavin Williams to it, I'm loving this secondary class. It's still probably like one or two more guys, but Gavin Williams is kind of that boy. If you get him, man, I'm feeling great about this secondary. He's a big-time football player. Big fan of Gavin Williams as a player.
Agreed completely. Let's go back up to Notre Dame's backyard and talk about a defensive tackle from Chicago, Illinois, and we'll talk about Braden Parks, somebody that we've talked about quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. He's a certified dude, but a certified dude that's ranked a little too low for our liking.
Yeah, he's another one. It's not like he's a 3-star, right? I mean, everybody's got him as a 4-star. Everybody's, I believe, has him in the top 200 except for ESPN. They have him at 264. But Trev, I'm like, this is a top 100 football player. Like I'm sure not everybody agrees with me, but I think Braden Parks is a top 100 football player. I do. I think he's big. He's physical. He can absolutely collapse the pocket. He's 6'3", 295. Pretty darn good athlete for a kid that's basically about 300 pounds. Depends on who you ask. If he's 295, is he 305? It varies depending on who you ask. Love his motor. But I love the fact that he stands out on a defensive line that has a 5-star in Cam McGee, and then also had a kid in King Liggins last year who's a 26 recruit who signed with Illinois and who I liked a lot. Like, if Notre Dame would have wanted to take King Liggins as their third defensive tackle last year, I would not have been upset about it at all. I mean, I really like him. He's a little undersized, but I can live with that. But then you have a guy like Braden who stands out with those guys on the roster. That's a dude. Like, look at this play right here. That's a bully play right there, Trev. An absolute bully play. And Braden and Brother Rice plays against very good competition. And Braden went out last year on a team that won a state championship, won the state title game 16-0. Their opponent like barely had 100 yards of offense, and he just bullied them. I mean, he's an outstanding football player. This is a top 100 football player, in my opinion. And he's not getting enough love. And I'll be honest with you, I think he's underrated by Notre Dame fans. I think there's a lot of hype about, Marcus Freeman, rightfully so. David Falarunshu, rightfully so. But I think there's been a little bit of a ho-hum. Maybe there's an assumption that they're going to get him, which I understand. I don't necessarily agree with it. But I don't think even there's enough excitement from our fan base about how good this kid is and how good of a pickup he is because he's been on the board so long. I think is a big reason why, and because he doesn't have the ranking that he should. David Falarunshu's ranked as the number 13 player in the country by On3. Marcus Freeman is a top 50 player. Braden is outside the top 100. I think that's partly why some people view him as being below the other two. And what I'm telling people is no, he's right on there with the other two. They've got their ranking right. They got Braden wrong. And that's why I think he's a big-time player and an absolute must-get in this class for Notre Dame. And it won't be easy. Oregon wants him. Miami wants him. Ohio State recently offered him. They're making a move on him, although I think there's some other guys that they are kind of targeting a little bit more than him right now. But this kid's got big boys on him. And he's an absolute must get for Notre Dame. I feel good about where Notre Dame is, Trev. I think this is my favorite play. Remember we broke this down a couple weeks ago? This is a 300-pounder who literally sniffs out a screen. First of all, great job. Gets that guy off his knees, right? Weak cut attempt. Reads the screen and then jumps over a ball carrier or a lineman in front of a ball carrier to intercept the pass at 300 pounds. That's a top 100 football player, Trev. Like, I'm sorry. He's a top 100 player. Notre Dame, I believe, is the leader, but I don't believe it's a lock that he's going to pick Notre Dame right now. Miami's making a really hard push for him, and they're putting all their Chicago assets into play, and there's a lot more Chicago assets than I'm comfortable with for Miami. And that's what helped them with Justin Scott and Marquise Lightfoot. But Oregon's also a team that he likes a lot. I still feel like Notre Dame is the school to beat still, and other teams are acting like Notre Dame is a school to beat. The good news is that Notre Dame has not they're not recruiting him like someone that they assume they're going to get. They know this is a battle, and they're putting in that work. And he was on campus the first weekend of March that they had visits. He was on campus that opening weekend. I believe was it then, or was it this past week? I thought it was the first weekend he was on campus.
I thought it was March 21st.
Yeah, it was the first weekend. And visit went really well. And it was a great opportunity for him to get a chance to see, because he really knew Coach at Washington very well. Camped at Notre Dame last summer, did a great job at the camp. We talked about him at Irish Invasion. We talked about him over the summer. Had been to practices before, had really gotten to know Coach Washington well. This was a chance for him to see Charlie Partridge in action, and it went very, very well. So I like where Notre Dame is at, but there's still work to be done here. But this is a kid that Notre Dame fans need to get more excited about, and the national recruiting services need to start giving a little bit more respect to. This is a top 100 football player.
100%. Let's talk about a linebacker, Brian, and talk about Noah Glover, linebacker in the 2027 class. Very talented kid.
So my Virginia bias is going to show a little bit maybe on this one, but I just think this kid's a big-time football player. So very underrated player, Trev. I was actually shocked when I saw his ranking, and because I just assumed he was going to be a consensus top 100 player, because I didn't actually start breaking him down till recently, because Notre Dame wasn't really a player for him prior to Brian Jean-Marie arriving. Like, that's the only reason they became a player for him. So did some research on him. He's from Battlefield High School in Haymarket, Virginia. Very talented player. He's ranked, the highest ranking he has is 152 by 247. Rivals on 3 ranks him at number 206, and ESPN ranks him at number 263. This is a top 100 football player. You know, he's a great modern linebacker, 6'1", 6'2", elite short area quickness and power, surprising power for a kid that's like 205 pounds. There's a couple hits Trev he has here where he takes 2 steps and drills somebody. You'll see it on these clips, but he's rangy, he's athletic, he's really good in coverage, he can come down and stick. As he fills out, he's going to be a big-time player. He reminds me a ton of Jaden Ausberry, like a ton. And everybody remembers how high I was on Jaden Ausberry. But this kid's a really good football player, Trev. And he's a barely 200 pounds, and he packs a punch playing in Virginia. He plays against good competition as well. That's a good area. But I love his power, love his closing speed. He plays like a bigger linebacker. You know what I mean? Like, when he's coming downhill, he plays like he's a Mike. But then when they ask him to scrape and flow and drop into coverage, you're like, okay, there's that Will athleticism. He's got a Will body and Will athleticism, but he's got Mike tenacity and power. And that's why I love Noah Glover. I just think this is a top 100 football player. Absolutely top 100 football player. And it's a kid that right now, if I was predicting a school, Trev, I would not pick Notre Dame. I think that, Miami, Georgia, A&M are schools that are ahead of Notre Dame right now. The visit he had first weekend of March got Notre Dame in the mix, legitimately in the mix, and that's what they needed to do. And now it's going to be about, can you keep him from committing anytime soon to another school and get him back on campus for an official? That's going to be the key. So right now, Notre Dame's in the mix. They're not the school I'd predict, but that doesn't change the fact that this kid is vastly underrated and one of my favorite prospects in this class.
Well, and the film makes it obvious as to why this kid is absolutely relentless. Absolutely relentless. Name of the game is going to be getting him back on campus for an official visit. I'm with you. I'm with you completely. Let's kind of tie a bow on the defensive segment, Brian, and go back to the defensive line. And it's a player that we've talked about on this channel before, but it's Montana Toilolo. Another very underrated kid, very talented player as well.
Yeah, he's ranked as a consensus 3-star, and it's not so much the 3-star ranking that bothers me, Trev. It's how low of a 3-star he is. That's where I think people are missing the boat, and I understand why. He's listed at 6'2", 6'3". I was told he's close to 6'3". He's listed at 255 pounds. He's ranked as a 3-star, like low 3-star, number 521 player in the country on the On3 rankings. He's 531 on 247. I think he's a borderline top 250 player. mean, there's a reason Notre Dame, Miami, Washington, a lot of schools like that are on him. He's got offers from all over the country. SEC schools have offered him. Oregon has offered him. Penn State's offered him. Tennessee's offered him. It's just not the biggest guy in the world. Reminds me a lot of if Junior Tuilamaka was a D tackle, that's Montana. That's kind of player he is. So he's a guy where you get him, he's your number 3. Here's what he is. If you want a comparison, he's a better, more talented version of Elijah Hughes. That's what he is to me. Just a pretty good player. Never will get the fanfare and all that type of stuff. And there's always going to be people that question his size and all that. But this kid's athletic. He's powerful. There was a guy on the board when I said something about him the other day. He's like, look, I'm from that area. I went and watched him play because he plays at Mater Dei. So it's like the odds of Notre Dame getting him, I just never assume they're going to get a kid from Mater Dei. I told Trev this. The last time Notre Dame got a kid from Mater Dei, I think was either right before he was born or right when he was born. It was Brad Williams, who I think was like 96 or 97, something like that. Like, I forget when Brad signed with Notre Dame, but I believe that's the last time Notre Dame signed and had a kid on the team from Mater Dei. It's been a long time. And so I think he was actually before you were born. He might have been done by the time he got to 1997. I have to go refresh my memory on that, but it's been a while. Mater Dei has not been kind to Notre Dame. Maybe Montana's different. I don't know. We'll see. But this is a kid that I really like. If he can be that number 3 guy in a class at D tackle, you're going to love him as a player. You're going to love him. And I now, as far as where things stand, I think Notre Dame did a great job on that visit. Washington's another school to watch. I think Notre Dame put themselves in a position that they're now the team being chased, in my opinion, as opposed to the team doing the chasing. Long way to go, obviously. I mean, as of now, a long way to go. I don't think he's ready to make a decision, but I don't think Lathan Wissington was ready to make a decision coming into his visit either. And things change when you know, you know. So we'll see if they can kind of close this one out, but very underrated player. He won't be like, I'm going to be doing a series coming up on the board. It's the race to number 1. These are the things that Notre Dame needs to do to once again battle for the number 1 ranked recruiting class. Montana Tololo is not going to help you win the number 1 ranked recruiting class. If anything, he's going to hurt you a little bit. But here's where Montana is going to help you on the field with what he brings to your D-line. That's where he helps you. And that's why he's one of my more underrated players in the country and in this class.
Understandably so. And you're going to need him. Like we said at the start of today's show, yes, we can talk blue chip ratio. We could talk about the amount of 5 stars. But one thing that a lot of the teams on FanDuel's odds to win the national championship this upcoming season have in common is there's a lot of underrated recruits for them. I mean, Georgia has they're the 4th best odds to win the national championship this year. There's 3 teams tied for 3rd. Gunnar Stockton was not a 5-star top 20 recruit coming out of high school. We talked at Notre Dame for Leonard Moore, players like that. Yeah, Texas has Arch Manning, but they have a bunch of players that were very underrated coming out. So you're going to need them. You're absolutely going to need them to put together a championship caliber roster. Brian, on the final part of today's show here in the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're kind of broadening the scope a little bit. We're talking big picture college football. And what we're talking about here, thankfully, we don't have to have this discussion of it going on in South Bend. We're talking about impactful quarterback battles that are going on across the country. And a couple things play a factor here. Some of it's just there were teams that have impactful quarterback battles going on. And then depending on the school, the winner of that battle could have a bigger impact across the board in college football. So we wanted to dive into some of those. There's some interesting quarterback competitions going on across the country this year.
There certainly are. And there's a couple on Notre Dame's schedule as well, Trev. But, this is true every year in college football. There's always years where the top programs or teams that are trying to ascend or continue an ascent that maybe began. Virginia's an example. We'll talk about that. Teams that are looking to bounce back are going to do so with needing a quarterback to play well, but they don't know who their quarterback is going to be going into the spring. And of course, as Notre Dame fans, we're not unfamiliar with quarterback battles, right? We went through one last year. We went through one in 2022. We went through one kind of in 2021 and 2018, 2016. We've seen these before. And it's just fun to be on the opposite side of this where we're not having a conversation about quarterback battle. I know there's people that are trying to force a debate this offseason about a quarterback battle, but we're not talking about backup quarterback battles right now. Like, we'll talk more about that in the fall when it matters, not right now in the spring when one of the guys in that battle is not even on campus. But there are some battles that are going to have an impact on the national championship race. There's some quarterback battles that are going to have a big say, in my opinion, Trev, on who wins certain conferences. And that means that a team could contend for it, or a team's going to be very dangerous, and their upsets of teams because of their quarterback play is going to result in a team that not winning it that otherwise could have won it, and and everything kind of in between. So we've got 2 Notre Dame battles and then 5 national battles plus some other things we want to talk about on this one to get into it. So we'll explain who's in the battle. Not really get so much into predictions as much right now, Trev. We can if we want to, but that's not the point of this. But to talk about more so like what is at stake here for these teams. And when we start off with the Notre Dame schedule, kind of going in order, you start off with North Carolina. They've got a 3-man race right now between Billy Edwards, who transferred from Wisconsin, and then Maryland. You've got Tayron Dickens, who transferred from Western Carolina, and then Miles O'Neill from Texas A&M. 3 transfers, all battling for the starting job at North Carolina. And this is a big one for North Carolina, Trev, because they need to get some good momentum here under Bill Belichick. And how this battle shakes out and then how that player plays is going to have a big role in if they can have a bounce-back season.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's been a lot of moving parts earlier in the offseason for North Carolina's offense. Yeah, Gio Lopez, who's like, I'm leaving. Actually, I'm coming back. No, actually, I'm leaving. So they put that behind them. That's in the rearview mirror. They went out and they hired Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator. Very, very interested. Sidebar, not a part of the quarterback battle, but a sideline duo of Bill Belichick and Bobby Petrino is pretty funny. That aside, this quarterback battle is going to be absolutely huge because they need to put last season behind him. Gio Lopez had some talent, not necessarily the style of quarterback that I think Bill Belichick can have a lot of success with. But there are some guys on this roster within this battle that I think is going to be very, very interesting. I mean, for Billy Edwards, name of the game is just, can you be healthy? He transferred to Wisconsin with the expectation that he was going to take over and help be a part of the Wisconsin turnaround under Luke Fickell. Well, that ended up fizzling out because he got hurt. Can he be a part of the turnaround in North Carolina now? That's going to be very interesting to see. And then they also got Taron Dickens, who, Brian, you were talking to me about before the show, electric FCS level quarterback. Just can he make the transition to the Power 4 level, to really just the D1 level, and make a splash in that quarterback competition? That one's going to be very interesting as well. Don't know how that's going to pan out. And then we watched this film a little bit before the show. You and I actually watched it together, I believe. But Miles O'Neill is a very interesting quarterback as well. So this is a very interesting quarterback competition. North Carolina is looking to turn everything around. I just don't know how it's going to pan out.
And they're very different quarterbacks. Billy Edwards is kind of similar to Miles O'Neill in some ways, but not. Miles O'Neill is a very highly ranked recruit. He's so good that On3 ranked him over 100 spots higher than CJ Carr coming out of high school. But I never thought he was that good. But, he's a good prospect, Trev. Accurate, seems to be able to, seems like a smart kid, all these other type of things. But, obviously couldn't beat out Marcel Reed. That's nothing to be too ashamed of. Marcel had some experience on him and that type of thing. But, I think if you're North Carolina, you want him or Tayron Dickens to win the job. The thing with Tayron Dickens is if you look at his numbers last year, Trev, he had bonkers numbers. Just absolutely insane numbers at Western Carolina. And I'm going to give you guys some numbers. He passed for 3,508 yards, 38 touchdowns and 2 picks, and also rushed for 300 yards. Now, you may say, well, hold on a second. 3,508 yards, that's bonkers. He played 9 games. That's it. Played 9 games. You know what I mean? Like he didn't do this over the course of, 13, 14 games. He played 9 games and, was a really productive player for Western Carolina last year. The issue, Trev, is that he's undersized, and that's really kind of the concern for me. He didn't start the season as the starting quarterback. They started the year 0-3, so we didn't get to see him play against like Wake Forest. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have seen him play against Wake Forest. He didn't start that game. He didn't play against, Gardner Webb. He didn't play against Elon. And then he took over in the next game, and they start 0-3, and then they go 7 and they finished 7-5. So they went 7-2 in his starts. The losses they had, they lost to Mercer, who was a playoff team last year, 49-47. So, so we remember Mercer last year, right? Like they were a playoff team last season. Trev, they won, I think 10 games. Let me see. They were 9-3 last year. They lost to South Dakota in the playoffs. They lost to Presbyterian early, and then they lost to Auburn. And I believe that was the game that Deuce Knight made his start. Deuce Knight against them passed for 239 yards, had 162 touchdowns and 6 touchdowns. That's a pretty impressive performance, right? You'd say that's pretty impressive performance. That was not the best performance that they saw from a quarterback that season. Because 2 weeks before that, in a 49-47 win, this kid went absolutely bonkers. Teron Dix went absolutely bonkers against Mercer in a 49-47 loss. He passed for 551 yards. He went 33 of 49, 559 yards, 7 touchdowns in that game, a 49-47 loss. Here's the problem. He's 5'11", $180, and he doesn't have a cannon. And I wonder how well that translates. But still, dude, you're looking at it. Braden Atkinson was a kid that like a lot of people were recruiting. Notre Dame had on for a visit. In that game, Braden Atkinson threw for 443 yards and had 3 touchdowns. This kid outdueled Braden Atkinson, but he's 5'11" and 180 pounds. And that's kind of the problem with him. So can his game translate to the Power 4 level? If it can, he's the wild card for me in this quarterback battle, because he gives them a playmaker. I mean, you watch him play, Trev. He can do stuff in the pocket, but he's the epitome of a street baller. He's running around. I mean, he's just throwing backwards and all this other kind of stuff. I don't know how well that translates to the Power 4 level, but if it does, he could be a wild card for North Carolina. If he's not the guy, you've got to hope that Miles O'Neill can be the guy, because Billy Edwards is what he is. And that's just to get you through a season and not completely kill you, but he's not going to win you a lot of games either. That's just the reality of it. So I think one of those two kids, I think, really needs to win it if North Carolina is going to have that bounce back season.
Agreed, man. They brought in Billy Edwards to be the floor. Let's just call a spade a spade. You brought in a guy that has started games at the P4 level before, and you kind of know what he's going to give you. If one of those two kids wins, I think North Carolina's overall ceiling on offense goes up tremendously. I'm with you. But North Carolina is not the only opponent on Notre Dame's schedule in 2026 that's going through a quarterback battle. There's also one going out in Chestnut Hill, Boston College, and Bill O'Brien is going through a quarterback battle. And it's going to be between Mason McKenzie, who transferred from Saginaw Valley, and then Grayson Wilson, who transferred from Arkansas. Not as high octane of a quarterback battle, I would argue, than the one that's going to be going on at North Carolina, but still one that's happening.
Yeah, Trev, it's not a good situation for Boston College. It's just not a good situation for Boston College. I don't think either one of these kids are players that you want to look at and say, boy, this guy is going to be that guy. I could end up being completely wrong, but I just don't see it. Mason McKenzie, the kid who's transferred from Saginaw Valley State at the Division II level, last year passed for 2,086 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions at the Division II level. He ran for 942 yards and 10 touchdowns, so he's bringing a bit of a run-throw look. But it's just kind of like he's a little bit schizophrenic right now with what he wants. You had Thomas Castellanos 2 years ago. You didn't like him. You didn't think he played within the system. So then you go out and get, Dylan Lonergan, who, is more of a drop back quarterback. He starts off well, finishes well, but in between, he doesn't play well. And you kind of blame him instead of blaming yourself for why your team isn't playing well. And then now you go back to the portal and you bring in a guy like Mason McKenzie, who's a dual threat quarterback coming out of high school, and then Grayson Wilson, who is a good athlete, but he's not even that type of guy. He's kind of an in-between guy of the two. And so there's just a lot of odd things that he's doing, but that's what you get when you think you know everything and you don't. And you got to stick to who are you going to be? And so now we're going back and forth between, you had a short athletic quarterback 2 years ago, didn't like that, went to the drop back kid last year, didn't like that. Now you're going back to a mobile guy. And, I know it worked out well for Ole Miss this year, but with all due respect, Trinidad Chambliss was a little bit of a different animal at the Division II level. And that's the same league. It's the same league. So you are kind of getting that, but Trinidad Chambliss in his last year there had 2,925 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 6 picks, and rushed for over 1,000 yards and 25 touchdowns, compared to a guy who barely had 2,000 yards passing, under 1,000 yards rushing, and had 27 combined touchdowns. Trinidad almost did that on the ground. You know what I mean? And only got picked off 6 times. There's a big difference. So couldn't happen to a nicer guy, but I think he needs to prove us wrong in regard to this quarterback battle, if this team is going to be good. Otherwise, it's going to be another long year. Very long.
Yeah, my read on the situation, I could be completely wrong, and this is not a shot at either kid that transferred in, but I think more so for Boston College, they took who was willing to come, not who they were able to get kind of conversation. I think it's more so that, but they are going through a quarterback competition. But Brian, let's kind of broaden the scope a little bit, talk nationally, because there are some high octane quarterback battles going on across the country that will have championship caliber, implications. One of those is going to be down in Tuscaloosa, because right now Austin Mack and Keelan Russell are battling it out for who's going to be the starter for Alabama this season.
This is a big one, Trev, and I think both of these kids can be successful in Alabama. I just feel like one of them gives Alabama a higher ceiling than the other. I think if Austin Mack wins this battle, and from what I can read, it sounds like it's a back and forth battle. Like it reminds me, when you read it, it reminds me a lot of last year's battle at Notre Dame, where a lot of people want that younger, rising sophomore, 5-star, super talented kid to win the job. It's Keelan Russell for Bama, and it was CJ Carr for Notre Dame, where the other part of the fan base likes that smart, older player, more experience, more time in the system, which is either Kenny Minchie or Steve Angeli, depending on which tribe you were in the Notre Dame fan base last year. And it's like, well, who's going to carry the day? And that's the battle that Alabama's going through. And what we said about Notre Dame last year is like, it's a win-win, whether it's Kenny or CJ, it's a win-win. They're both really good quarterbacks, but we also felt like the ceiling was higher. Like, here's how I felt about the battle last year. Kenny's the kind of kid that can get you to the playoffs, but I don't know he's the kind of kid that's going to put the team on his shoulders and win you a championship, like when they reach their peak. CJ's the kind of kid that when he reaches his peak does have that ability to not only get you to the playoffs, but then put a team on his shoulders, and he's the reason that you go win a championship. Not the saying that you couldn't win one under Kenny, but he wasn't going to necessarily be the driver of it. He was going to be the point guard of it. And I think that's what they're going through at Alabama. Austin Mack can absolutely run this offense, and Kalen DeBoer believes in him. That's why they brought him from Washington when they came over. But Keelan Russell's skill set is just a little bit different. But is he ready to take over? That's the question. And I think Keelan Russell winning CJ won the job. He wasn't handed it because of his upside being greater. He won the job. I think no matter who wins it, I think Bama's going to be an improved team this year if their defensive coaches get their heads out of their you-know-whats, and if they understand how important it is to actually have a pulse running the football this year. Like, quarterback is not going to be the thing that holds them back. Those things will. Quarterback is going to determine whether they're a playoff team again or whether Bama can make a run again. And I think part of that's going to depend on, is Keelan Russell ready yet? I think that's really where a lot of this boils down to for me. But this battle is going to be very, very entertaining.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to see who comes away victorious in this one. I echo a lot of the same sentiment that you do, but honestly, the biggest factor isn't even between the quarterbacks. It's what's lining up 7 yards deep and 1 yard to the side of them. If they can figure out who and what and the scheme to running the football, that's going to benefit both, because that's going to be the whole thing, man. It's going to be huge.
I don't even think it matters who. It's will you use that person? You know what I mean? Will you use that person to actually hand the ball off to, or are they just glorified pass blockers and pass catchers that line up in the super slot position? Which is essentially what the running back was for them. It was a super slot. I mean, it's that's kind of what it was. It was ridiculous. I think that the youth at quarterback, you'd think would cause them to want to run the ball more, but that should have been why they didn't put all that pressure on Ty Simpson last year, and they still chose to do that. So I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to get that turned around. I do, but I don't. Like, I do because of some of the moves they made, but I still need to see it. And that could take a lot of pressure off. But at the end of the day, in a Kalen DeBoer offense, it's as far as the quarterback can take you. And I think ultimately Keelan Russell can take him further, but I think both of these kids have an opportunity to be upgrades over Ty Simpson. I'm not a big Ty Simpson fan. And I think the fact that anyone's even debating if he's the number 2 quarterback in his class, and now you're getting some of these draft analysts who are apparently bored and don't have anything to write about to want to argue that he might be better than Fernando Mendoza. He might be better than Francisco Mendoza, but he's not better than Fernando Mendoza. There's no question about that.
Bro, you got me for a second. I was like, Francisco. I was like, where'd he go? I was like,
yeah. He's Fernando's alter ego that I could never, who I would always say was the quarterback at Indiana. Whenever he didn't play well, it was Francisco. Whenever he played well, it was Fernando. But
yeah,
I would take Drew Aller before I would take him.
Yeah.
Like, honestly. At least with Drew, you got a guy with some big physical tools, but Drew in clutch moments. Well, I've seen Drew play well in more clutch moments than I've seen Ty Simpson play well. What about the Notre Dame game? Yeah, I get that. Did you see what he did at the end of the Penn State game? He brought them back into that game. He led them down the field for a game-tying touchdown against Ohio State in 2024, and then Chris Kotelnicki decided he didn't want to call plays like anyone with a brain. You know what I mean? That wasn't on Drew Aller. Like, even remember the interception that Penn State had, or that Ohio State had, like, late in the half on the that was not on Drew Aller. That was on the receiver. You got to catch that dang ball, man. So yeah, he's got some issues. I'd take him over Ty Simpson any day of the week. I think both these guys have a chance to be upgrades, a chance, but you can't put as much on them as you put on Ty Simpson last year. That was more on Kalen DeBoer than it was Ty. You asked Ty to write checks his body couldn't cash.
And unfortunately, our friends over at FanDuel also think very highly of Ty Simpson in the draft. He has significantly higher odds to go number 2 overall than what Jeremiah Love does, which is a choice.
If that were to happen, that would be evidence that the NFL has lost. It's completely, truly, 100% lost its way when it comes to evaluating and drafting quarterbacks. And whoever makes that decision will get fired very soon. Very soon.
Yeah, agreed completely. Yeah. But the Alabama quarterback competition isn't the only one that's going on in the SEC even. Let's talk about Tennessee. They have a 3-way battle between George McIntyre, Ryan Staub, and then Faison Brandon. Is that correct?
You got it correct. It is not backwards. That is his name, yeah.
Okay. Heck of a name. But the search is on to find a new starting quarterback for Tennessee. This is going to be their 3rd starter in 3 years, regardless of who wins the job. Very interested to see who wins this one, because Tennessee could be a sleeper in the SEC depending on who wins this job. I do believe that.
Yes, I agree. I mean, look, he is a very, very talented player, Trev, and he was a top 5 quarterback in last year's class. 2 of the outlets had him as a 5-star. He's a very talented player, but I also liked George McIntyre coming out. I thought George McIntyre was a very talented quarterback. You also got Ryan Staub, who's a transfer from Colorado. He couldn't beat out, Caden Halter and Juju Lewis last year. So I don't. If he ends up winning the job, Tennessee's in big freaking trouble, in my opinion. He's a really good backup quarterback. But you look at George McIntyre, who was a really highly ranked guy 2 years ago, tall, skinny. He's Mike McIntyre's nephew, I believe. I thought he was his son at first, and I think I said that the first time we talked about him. But he's actually Mike McIntyre's nephew. Obviously, he's a longtime football coach, but it's just, can he hold up? He's got an arm. He can throw the ball downfield. He's a pretty decent athlete, but he's a string bean. I'm actually going to go look and see what his current size is on the roster at Tennessee. But I really like George. I think if he wins the job this year, I'll feel really good about Tennessee, because I think he's the kind of kid that could really thrive. He's listed at 6'6", 201 on the current Tennessee roster. He was a true freshman last year. He's going to be a redshirt freshman this year. I like George McIntyre a lot. If he plays well and wins the job, I'm going to feel really good about Tennessee's season. If he plays well, but Faison Brandon wins the job, I don't think Tennessee is going to be as good this year, but watch out in 2027 for Tennessee. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I'm at with Faison Brandon, because he's very talented, very live arm, athletic. He's one of those kids that's a really good athlete that can do a lot of damage, but he is a pocket passer who can also hurt you with his legs. He's not like a dual threat in the sense that he's the next Devin Dampier. He is a really talented. He's not Haynes King. He's not Marcel Reed. He's more Malik Washington with a different body type. He doesn't have like the massive size that Malik has, but he's a really talented quarterback. They're both really talented. Is who's going to win the job? Is Faison able to come on as a freshman and beat out George McIntyre? Does George McIntyre just not play well and Faison kind of gets it by default? Those are all the things that are going to matter. It's not just who wins the job, but why. Does George win the job because Ryan Staub's not very good and Faison's just not ready? Or does George win the job because Faison showed a lot of talent, but George just was on a different level? That's going to be the big thing for me. And it's not so much who wins the job, because they've got two very talented young quarterbacks. And I think with Tennessee this year, Trev, I think it's the perfect year for them to have a quarterback like this, because last year would have been a disaster if they would have had to have one of these two quarterbacks there. I think if Joey Aguilar wasn't your quarterback last year, Tennessee might have gone 500, because you didn't have your offensive line was just, it was a work in progress, and your receiving core was a bit of a work in progress. You had new backs and all that kind of stuff. So you look at this year, you've got Deshaun Bishop coming back. He had 1,000 yards last season. You know, you've got some talented young backs. You got a transfer coming in. You've got you lose Chris Brazell, who was a big-time player, but Mike Matthews comes back. Braylon Staley comes back. Rodarius Jackson comes back. You got a big-time five-star Tristan Keys coming in. You got a solid depth player as a transfer. You've got some good tight ends coming back. Ethan Davis can play. Then it comes down to, okay, what are they going to do with their offensive line? They lost Lance Hurd, but there's some talented young players taken back. They got 4 returning starters on the offensive line, including Sam Pendleton, a Notre Dame transfer, and also David Sanders, who started last year as a true freshman, former 5-star. So I think this team is built to where they can protect the quarterback like they protected Nico 2 years ago. Very overrated quarterback. You guys know that. They had to protect Nico. That's why they were totally fine letting him walk. You know what I mean? And not pay him the money he wanted. So I think they're built to do that this year offensively. Is their defense as good as it was 2 years ago? That's going to determine their season. But this is a good year to do that. And so I think if Faison is close, or you think he could be better, but you're only worried about his experience, then make the move and just have the offensive line and run game protect him a little bit until he gets his feet wet. Could see a situation where maybe, George McIntyre, Ryan Staub starts and they kind of work Faison in a little bit until he's ready to take over. There's a lot of scenarios, but who wins the job and how and why is going to be what matters. Does someone win it because they're that good, or does somebody win it because of the 3 options they have the least problematic resume? That's going to determine how good Tennessee is. But if it's a good win like this, okay, this guy in a great battle won it, kind of like what CJ Carr beating out Kenny Minchie last year, then I think Tennessee is one of my sleeper teams in the SEC. They are, like, as far as being a potential playoff team. This right here is going to go a long way towards determining that, though, Trev.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, shoot, Tennessee was a playoff team under Nico. Now, obviously, other factors were at play, but I like this.
Yeah, because they had a great defense and a strong run game, and a receiver that could stretch the field, and Dante Thornton, right? I mean, it wasn't because of Nico, and sometimes it was in spite of Nico. I think there's no reason these kids can't be what Nico was 2 years ago. Agreed. If not maybe a little bit better, because they can actually read a defense.
Agreed. 100%. 100%. Another quarterback battle. We've actually talked about this one on the show before, but it's at Iowa, and it's Jeremy Heklinski and Hank Brown. This is a very intriguing one, Brian. I know you're very high on what Iowa can be this season, and this quarterback battle plays a lot into that.
It does, man. I look at it, Trev, and it's one of those things where which direction do you want to go? Because the 2 quarterbacks that are in this competition, Trev, are very different players. Hank Brown is 6'4", 215, 220, drop back, pocket passer. That's what Iowa had been doing for years. and to a lot of lack of success. You know what I mean? Last year they went out and got Mark Gronowski, and I think he did a lot of good things. He did. I think he was a good player for them. They still don't just throw a whole lot, but he can make some plays with his legs. He was a gamer, and you were limited against some of the better teams in your schedule. You just weren't going to have enough firepower to beat Indiana. You just needed that one extra drive to beat Indiana, to beat Oregon. But it's the reason why they why they were able to beat some other teams on their schedule. You couldn't quite get over the hump with those three top teams, USC being another example. And so you were closer to me than you were in the past with the big stiffs who couldn't move, because your offense just became useless when those guys weren't playing, because they were just sitting in the pocket, just stiffs. Jeremy Higlinski has a little bit of that to him. He's more of a Mark Gronowski type. Now, he's not the runner Gronowski is, I don't think, but he's kind of got that gamer. He's 5'11". He's a $185, $190, nice live arm, can throw on the run, can move the pocket, shows good timing. But he's also is not an elite arm talent. It's not like he's like Everett Golson as a thrower either. So it's kind of like, who wins this battle is going to determine how the offense even looks. You're going to go back to the 11, 21 personnel under center type of thing with Hank Brown, or are you going to kind of be more of a team that can mix up shotgun with under center and all that type of stuff? So that's why I think this battle matters. And if Hank Brown wins the job, he wins the job. But if I'm an Iowa fan, I'm fingers crossed hoping that Jeremy Higlinski wins this job. And I keep getting them confused because Hank Brown just sounds like the name of a 5'11", 190-pound gamer. You know what I mean? But it's not. It's Jeremy Higlinski. But that's kind of where I'm at for me with this battle. And I think if whoever wins the job can play well, this Iowa team is going to be sneaky good in the Big Ten this year. They're one of those sleeper playoff teams for me, Trev. I can't put them there yet, but if the quarterback, right, can do this, then they are in that battle, because they almost beat Indiana last year. They almost beat Oregon last year, but that's been the story at Iowa. Almost. And it's going to take the quarterback stepping up to take them over the top. Can one of these two guys do it? It's going to be the storyline every offseason.
Yeah. This is a very intriguing battle for all the reasons that you listed off. And it's also going to tell me a little bit about Kirk Ferentz as a head coach. Here's the fact of the matter. As much as I want to see a team like Notre Dame, obviously, have more of a threat in the passing game, and we got to see that last year with C.J. Carr. An Iowa quarterback has not thrown for over 10 touchdown passes since 2019. It's a very long time. And you're not going to convince me it's all because of skill. And when I mean over 10, I don't mean like, oh, yeah, the guy that went over 10 in 2019 had 30. He had 16. Mm-hmm. Like Spencer Petras was at 10 and at 9 during the years he started. Cade McNamara was under. Their starting quarterback last year was right at 10. So whoever wins this job is also going to tell me that Kirk Ferentz is going to put a little bit more on the plate of his quarterback as well. If Hank Brown wins this job, kind of shows me that it's, okay, you're going to be under center a little bit. You'll be running a lot of 21 personnel, not expecting a whole lot. But if Jeremy Higlinski wins this job, tell me that you're willing to open up the quarterback position a little bit more. That's been the thing that's holding Iowa back for such a long time, because I'm with you. I think their ceiling is high. I do. But if Kirk Ferentz isn't open to having just slightly more of an expanded offense, I will put the rest of the money that I will ever make, ever, on how Iowa's season's going to go. They're going to go 8-4, 9-3. They're going to be like, oh, you don't want to go play there because, they got the tough
they're
environment.
Just so close. Yeah, they were a play here and a play there away from being 10-2 and playing for the Big Ten title. You know, which they could do when they were in the West, but now that it's everybody, it's like, okay, it's a little harder now. There's no more 8-5 Purdue's and 9-3 Iowa's getting to the Big Ten title game. Exactly right.
100%, man. Another quarterback battle is going on. Let's switch back to the SEC, and a lot of movement down in Gainesville with the Florida Gators. They got Aaron Philo and Tramel Jones battling it out at quarterback, and it's under the supervision now of a new head coach, albeit it's a head coach that has kind of made a living thus far of developing quarterbacks. So I think this battle is going to be very, very interesting to watch unfold.
Yeah, I was impressed with the job that they did last year with the kid from BYU, who, Trev, I was not a big fan of as a quarterback. And I still am not a big fan of a quarterback. And what I liked about what they did with him last year was it was very obvious that they knew his limitations and they built around those limitations. You know what I mean? Like there was no mistaking who he was with how they game plan. And I thought they did a really nice job of that with Retzlaff, and say, hey, we're not going to ask this kid to be something that he's not. And that showed me a little something. Well, now it's like, okay, you've got two talented quarterbacks now. We got Aaron Philo, who came in with the offensive coordinator, Buster Faulkner, and you've got Tramel Jones, who are two very different quarterbacks. And how well those guys perform is going to determine how good this team can be. It's a lot like what we said with Tennessee. Does Aaron Philo step into the offense knowing it? He's not Haynes King. He's a very different type of quarterback than Haynes King. This is also going to be one that determines what the offense is going to look like. With Aaron Philo, you're going to have more of a traditional looking spread offense. And with Tramel Jones, you're going to have more of a dual threat Haynes King type, although he's not the runner that Haynes King was in the same type, but he's more of a dual threat. He's got a live arm, but he's on the smaller side. He's live. He's going to make some plays with his arm and with his legs and things like that. And he was a kid that had a very bizarre recruiting ranking. He was a guy that some had as a 3-star and Rivals had as a borderline top 50 guy. And I think a lot of it has to do with his size and the fact that I think Rivals likes, will give more credit to some of the gunslingers a little bit, the dual threat guys. And so we'll see which one wins the day. I would put my money on Aaron Philo because I just think he's just a much better passer. And I think the fact that he knows the offense is why I think he has that edge, but he's got to win it. And I think the presence of Tramel Jones could be very good for Florida because Aaron Philo can't walk in and just, I'm the guy. He's going to have to win the job over a returner, a talented young returner, but a returner. And if he can outplay Tramel Jones, I think that's his first chance to tell his teammates, hey, you can trust me. I've proven myself. And then he's a guy that knows how to run this offense. So I expect Aaron Philo to win it, but I don't think it's a given that he's going. I don't think it's just like a no-brainer. This isn't like the Sam Hartman, Tyler Buckner battle. You know what I mean? Like, it's not quite that. He's got to win it. He's got to show that he's that guy. Because I'm sorry, one start does not mean that you're like the guy, 2 career starts, I should say, does not mean that you're the guy, but he has played some meaningful snaps and played some meaningful downs. And so I think that's why I give him the edge, but he's got to go out and win it. Cause if you just hand him the job, you have a chance you could lose the locker room. They want to see him earn it. Everybody else has to earn it, see him earn it. So that's the big key for Aaron Philo is you got to step up and perform well. Because I think he gives them their best chance to be successful this year running that offense.
Let's talk about a quarterback competition going on at Virginia. And this one is very intriguing. You have Bo Pribula, who transferred in from Missouri, and Eli Holstein, who transferred in from Pitt. You got 2 guys and 2 transfers going at it, which I don't think we have a whole lot of. There was some on like Notre Dame schedule, but it's always like kind of like an incumbent versus like the new riser or a transfer. Yeah. This one, it's just 2 transfers going at it.
Yeah, the only other one where that was true, well, the North Carolina BC ones are that way. But like the national ones, it's a transfer versus a recruited kid, but kind of, because even the transfer was recruited out of high school by this staff. He transferred to follow them. Tennessee, there's 2 recruited kids and then a transfer. Iowa is, I think, a returning kid and a transfer, but the transfer was a couple years ago from Wake Forest. And then Florida is a recruited kid and a transfer. To your point, this is 2 transfers. But we're going to talk a little bit about Florida State, about their situation is a recruited kid and transfer. A lot of people talk about LSU and their quarterback room and being 2 transfers, but there's another kid on there that I think is potentially in the mix if Sam Leavitt doesn't pan out, that I believe was recruited to LSU. But a lot of these are high school versus transfer. This is one where it's 2 transfer kids coming in at the same time. And that's not something that we see as much as, to your point, where a lot of times it's transfer kid versus a returner or an incoming high school recruit. And it makes it a little bit different.
It does. I'm very interested to see how this is going to pan out. First and foremost, shout out to Virginia and their coaching staff because they did 10 times better than what I thought that they were going to do in 2025. And now the biggest question is, how do you follow that up? And one of the ways is you're going to figure out if it's Bo Prabula or Eli Holstein is going to be your starting quarterback. Here's kind of what this comes down to for me, which I think makes this very, very interesting. Bo Prabula, he got banged up at Missouri, but at the end of the day, they asked him not to come back. They were either going to roll with Matt Zollers or Austin Simmons, the transfer from Ole Miss, which they've actually officially named a starter. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Then with Eli Holstein, are you able to go back to what you were in 2024? That's going to be huge for him because in 25, he started the year as the guy. Statistically, he didn't look bad. I think when he was benched, it was like he had like 7 touchdowns and 2 picks, or like 10 touchdowns and 2 picks. It was some form of that. But watching the play on the field, he just kind of wasn't that guy. And then he got beat out for Mason Heinschel, and the rest is history. So very interested to see how this one pans out, Brian.
Yeah, this is a big one because, as you know, Trev, I haven't hidden this fact. I'm not super high on Bo Prabula. And he's a nice quarterback. You know, he did some nice things at Missouri last year. He was a good runner at Penn State, and he was kind of that off the bench, guy. I don't know that it's necessarily fair of me to say definitively what he was at Missouri, because I do think he got a little banged up. He got banged up in the Kansas game. I believe it was the Kansas game, and don't know how he was 100%. Then he got hurt again against Vanderbilt, missed 2 games, came back, and got hurt again against Arkansas. He had some good moments last year, threw for 334 against Kansas. Actually very good against Kansas, because I remember after the Kansas game, I was like, guys, I might have been wrong about Will Prabula. Like I said on the show, I think he's going to be better than I thought he was going to be, because I'm not high on him. But then as the season wore on, Trev, he kind of looked more and more like that guy. In his last, 7 games at Missouri, he threw 4 touchdowns and had 8 picks in his last, after the Kansas game. You could actually go there. He had 6 touchdowns and 9 picks after the second game of the year. He threw 5 touchdowns, no picks in the first 2 games, completed almost 80% of his passes. And then the rest of the year he just did not perform nearly as well. Once they got into the ACC slate, he was not as effective. And in his big games, like he went 26 of 29 against UMass. He went 23 of 28 against Central Arkansas, 30 of 39 against Kansas. But when you got into Big SEC play, he wasn't as effective. And, but he's a good runner, good athlete, does some things with his legs and all that. But I think Eli Holstein's the opposite end of it. He's more of a drop back guy. He can move a little bit, but he's more of a drop back guy. And for Eli, it's like, who are you? Like, as a quarterback, honestly, like, who are you? Are you the guy that we saw last year that I think struggled a little bit, eventually got benched for a freshman after an injury? You didn't win the job back. Had some good moments, threw for 303 yards against West Virginia, but had a bad pick and missed some opportunities in that game. You lit up Central Michigan and played well against Duquesne. And the year before, we've talked about this. Eli Holstein getting hurt is a big reason why Pitt collapsed on the stretch. Started off 7-0. That season and had some monster games, tore up West Virginia, threw for over 300 against Cincinnati in a win, threw for 381 in a road win over North Carolina, had 3 touchdowns, had some really big moments. He went 11 of 15 for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns against Syracuse in a game that was over at halftime. Remember that, like 2 pick sixes in the first half. And it was like, we're all like, I've never seen anything like this against Syracuse, and Syracuse can't. Like, we have, you know what I mean? Like, we kind of went through this against Pitt last year. It was obviously worse with Notre Dame, but that was a wild game. Kyle McCord threw like 2 pick sixes in the first half of that game. So Eli didn't need to throw a whole lot, but when he did, he was good. Are you going to get that version of Eli or what we've seen since? And that's really the big key. If you get the early 2024 version of Eli Holstein, watch out for Virginia in the ACC again this year. If you don't get that and you get Bo Prabula, then I don't feel as good about Virginia's odds. I think this is the battle more than any other that's going to have the biggest impact on how this team plays. Because I think Virginia's hoping that Bo Prabula can be like what Chandler Morris was, and he's just not that player. He's not the thrower. He's not as experienced. He's not a coach's kid like like Chandler was. I'm just not super high on Bo Pribula. He'll put up better numbers in the ACC than he did in the SEC, but I just don't have faith he can lead them the way that Chandler Morris did last year, or that Eli could if Eli can return to that. And we had a super chat from up here from Tyler Reese. Thank you, Tyler. Wasn't Eli Holstein the top recruit? He was. He was some people had him as like a 5-star for a while. I'm going to look up his ranking right now, but yeah, he was a top 100 guy. I said, you can go find clips back then where I said I thought he was a little overrated. You know, when he signed with Alabama, I didn't think he was that good. ESPN had him as the number 29 player in the country. Ended up falling a little bit. Was a top 100 recruit on the On3 industry ranking. I didn't think he was that kind of guy. I still think he's better than Bo Pribula. But can he process defenses well enough? Can he read defenses well enough? Can he make good enough decisions to be what we saw early in 2024? And can he, when he starts getting pressured a lot, can he handle it? Because he didn't handle that very well at Pitt. That's the big question mark. But he gives this team more upside, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. All the chips are kind of on Eli Holstein's side of the table for me as well. I said this last year about Bo Pribula, and I'll say it again. It reminds me of what Oklahoma did with Blake Bell. In 2012, Blake Bell was the guy that they would bring in the goal line, and, you know, they'd have him run like QB draws and QB powers, and he'd have a lot of rushing touchdowns. And then when he took over in 2013, he was fine. And I think that's what Bo Pribula is as a quarterback. He's fine. But especially when you go to a school like Virginia, where the quarterback has to be a lot of the driver of your success, you need that in Eli Holstein. I don't think Bo Pribula is a quarterback that is geared to be the nucleus of a team's success.
Yep.
But I think Eli Holstein could if he goes back to his form. I'm with you there, with you completely. There's a couple of other ones, Brian, that are going on across the country that we just wanted to highlight real quick, and some other potential interesting quarterback battles going on across the country.
Yeah, so, you know, Virginia Tech's got one, which I think a lot of us are assuming that, and I think this is kind of fair, but a lot of us assume that Ethan Grunkmeyer is going to be the guy. But, you know, just kind of doing some reading, it sounds like he's kind of with the ones, but he hasn't necessarily won the job yet. Does this become a battle? You know, like that's an interesting thing. You've got Bryce Baker, who transferred in from North Carolina, but from just reading reports from Virginia Tech writers, I don't have any intel on this. I'm just, reading sources. Sounds like true freshman Troy Hune has really lit it up. And apparently he was unbelievable in their most recent open scrimmage, which is like the one we'll get on April 18th. Apparently he tore it up in that scrimmage, and he's making this a little tighter. So I think it's a good reason that they're having it's more of a battle now than we thought it was going to be. It's not because, from what I can read, it's not because Ethan Grunkmeyer's not as good as they hoped he would be. It's that Bryce Baker brings a different skill set to the table, and Troy Hune, as a true freshman, has just been that good that they're not able to just hand the keys to Ethan Grunkmeyer the same way. So I think that's a good problem to have for Virginia Tech. And I still think Ethan Grunkmeyer wins it, but could this turn into a battle in the fall? I'm very interested to see if James Franklin names Grunkmeyer starter at the end of spring. Very interested to see if that happens. So it's not a quarterback battle yet per se, but could it be when we get to the fall?
I know, man. That's the really interesting thing about all this, because, again, I understand why a lot of people think that. Obviously Ethan Grunkmeyer transferred over from Penn State. James Franklin was just at Penn State, but I don't think Ethan Grunkmeyer started while James Franklin was still the head coach.
Correct. Yeah, he started after Drew Aller got hurt, which I believe was after James. Hold on, let me go look real quick, Trev. I think you're correct, but let me just go look it up real quick. He was obviously a James Franklin recruit. Let me see when his first game was as quarterback. His first game was the Iowa game. So it was the game after they fired James Franklin. So you are correct. That was his first start.
So that adds an interesting dynamic to that. But again, to your point, he still recruited him, was still at practice with him. So that definitely plays a factor. But it's not like what we've seen other head coaches do, where they bring it's not like what the North Texas head coach did, and they just brought along their starting quarterback with them to then start at Oklahoma State. So it's not quite the same thing, but I'm with you. I think Ethan Grunkmeyer wins the job, but a push from some of the younger guys make that very, very interesting.
Like, this is when you want it to be a quarterback battle, where, like, you didn't expect it to be one. The guy you think's going to start has played well, but it's like somebody else is playing well enough that you're like, dude, I don't know if we can just hand this guy the job because of the way this other kid is playing. That's a good place to be for Virginia Tech. It's a good early sign for Virginia Tech, in my opinion. And then Florida State's another one, Trev. What's going to happen there? And that could have a big impact. And I think that with Gus as the OC, I think it was a no-brainer that it was going to be Ashton Daniels. I think this is more of a competition now because you've got a different type of offense that you're going to see run this year. That makes this a lot more interesting.
Yeah, agreed. With Gus's departure, it kind of, depending on what kind of style of offense you want to run, if you need a drop back and throw style at quarterback, I don't know if Ashton Daniels is your guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've seen him try to be that at 2 other spots, and he just wasn't. He wasn't that at Stanford. He wasn't that at Auburn, and now here we are at Florida State. Is this going to be the third time's the charm under Mike Norvell, a program that has kind of been a bottom feeder in college football the last 2 years? That's where you turned it around. So that makes it very, very interesting. I don't know how that's going to pan out. I really don't.
Yeah, and you look at the guys that are in the battle. You know, obviously you've got Kevin Sperry, I think is how you say his name. I could be wrong on that one, but you know, he's still there. And so, you know, how's he going to be? You got a kid transferring in from Lafayette College, I'm trying to find his stats right now. He was a starter at Lafayette. They're a Patriot League team. They're kind of that 1AA non-scholarship type of season, but I'm trying to find what his numbers were. I don't think he's really in the mix. I think it's more of a Kevin Sperry, Ashton Daniels type of battle. And I don't know that it's as much that Kevin Sperry is like this great quarterback as much as it's about, okay, can this guy really run the offense the way that we want it run? Because as you said, Ashton Daniels, I think, could have really thrived in the Gus Malzahn offense. I don't know that I love him running a different offense. Now, you know, your offensive coordinator now is Tim Harris, and I would assume that there's going to be some sort of attempt at some continuity. But Gus Gus had a different style as a play caller and designer, and I think that makes it concerning. But look, they're going to need one of these two guys to step up because that's going to be a big key to whether or not Florida State can rebound. I mean, honestly, I would argue that Mike Norvell's job hinges on how well this quarterback battle plays out and 100%. How well the winner of that quarterback job plays.
Agreed completely. One of the last ones here, Brian, that we wanted to talk about was LSU, and it's one that not a lot of people are talking about as a quarterback competition, but I know you have some different thoughts on this one.
Yeah, is it really a quarterback competition? Because I don't know that Sam Leavitt's out. He's just, I think he's kind of like on the Aeneas Williams plan for them. Like he's limited. He's not going to do a team, I believe, is from what I've read. And that's allowed, obviously, Hassan Longstreet to get a lot of reps, but it's also allowed Landon Clark. And I said earlier that I thought he was a recruited guy. He's not. He was also a transfer. He came in from Elon. And so my question is, I've heard he's getting some Insured by Big kind of confirmed this, that he's been getting some first-team reps this spring after transferring in from Elon. And obviously had some success at Elon last year, dynamic kid. He's from Virginia. So obviously he's, if you're a quarterback from Virginia, you're clearly wicked smart. But you look at sorry, can't help myself. No bias there, Trev. No, it has nothing to do with me being a quarterback from Virginia.
Oh, you're good, dude. I didn't sense any. You're good.
Totally fair and objective. But had 2,300 passing yards last year, 600 rushing yards, 18 touchdown passes, 11 rushing touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Again, none of us were all excited about Trinidad Chambliss. He was just a depth guy behind Austin Simmons, right? Like that's what he was brought in to be. Like, hey, you're a veteran player. If Austin Simmons gets hurt or doesn't pan out, you step in. And he stepped in and just played way better there than he did even at Fair State. You don't see that very often, where a guy is more productive when he goes to the Power 4 school than he does from an FCS or a Division II or even a G5. And that was the case with Trinidad Chambliss. Like, is this going to be Landon Clark going to be their Trinidad Chambliss moment, or are him and Hassan Longstreet holding the job down till Sam Leavitt's able to be full go? That's what I'm saying. I don't even know if it's a battle or not yet. But if I'm an LSU fan, I'm kind of hoping that one of those guys beats out Sam Leavitt, because as you know, Trev, I'm not a big Sam Leavitt guy. I think he went to the right school for himself. If he can thrive, he'll thrive in this offense. Lane Kiffin is the type of coach that can get the most out of Sam Leavitt. But as you know, I'm just not a huge Sam Leavitt guy for a host of reasons. He's got some talent, but is he a team guy? That's kind of where I'm at. So I don't know that it's a battle right now. I think it's more of they're waiting on Sam But if I'm an LSU fan, I'm hoping that one or two of these guys play well enough to where it may be a battle in the fall, or it gives Lane Kiffin a confidence where if I need to have a shorter leash, if Sam's not getting it done, I have a guy to step into. So I just think that's an interesting one to keep an eye on, Trev. And again, that's what I don't know that it's a battle, which is why we didn't talk about it in the top group, but it's just something that I'm kind of keeping my eye on a little bit. I am.
Yeah, I get that completely. Last one to briefly mention here, and we already talked about it earlier in the show, but Missouri actually, like a couple weeks ago, named a starting quarterback, and that flew under the radar. I didn't know that they had done that.
Yeah.
And it was Ole Miss transfer quarterback Austin Simmons who ultimately won the job away from Matt Zollers, who started in all those games when Bo Prabula was out. You guys remember Matt Zollers was a highly rated recruit. He was probably a year away from like being able to start. He was kind of thrust into that spot due to the injuries to Bo Prabula, but I was honestly kind of surprised that they named a starter before spring was even over.
Agree. I mean, he started the season as the number 3 because Sam Horn was in that mix too, and he got hurt, I think, in the season opener, and didn't play last year after that. But I'm surprised too, Trev. I mean, not that Matt Zollers did a whole lot last year. They didn't really give him a whole lot. I mean, he started 5 games. He threw 4 games, threw 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, only barely over 50%. But he's a talented kid, and I was a little surprised that he got beat out that quickly. I'm not super shocked that Austin Simmons beat him out. We both liked Austin Simmons going into last year, but it didn't happen as quickly. One of 2 things is true. Either A, Matt Zollers didn't show enough growth to really challenge a guy that's more proven, or B, Austin Simmons came in and really took hold of that thing. If you're a Missouri fan, you hope it's the latter. That, hey, Matt Zollers is going to be fine as long as he's patient. Austin is just way ahead of him right now and really performed well, really took to the offense and all that. Because I think Austin Simmons could thrive. I'm not a big fan of Eli Drinkwitz in a lot of ways. I think he's a good quarterback developer. I think he runs a good offense. And I think if Austin Simmons is healthy, that offense could really work well under him because he's a passer that can run. He's a very smart kid. I think he was the kid that graduated at like 16 out of high school, at like 16 years old. Like he's a young kid. So this could end up working out really well. But I also am with you, Trev. I'm surprised it ended as quickly. And apparently from some of the things I've read, and again, I'm just reading sources I don't know. Apparently, this went out. This was like it happened pretty quickly. Like, I mean, pretty easily. Like, it wasn't much of a debate when it was over. I haven't seen a whole lot of like, wow, I'm surprised. I'm surprised because I wasn't paying attention, but it doesn't sound like there was a lot of people that have talked about this that seemed overly surprised. I also heard, and I'm not sure how true this is, but I also heard that a Notre Dame transfer finished the spring as one of the starting safeties. Just saying. So we'll see if that continues.
Well, good deal. Very, very interested to see how that unfolds. Brian, I know we have a couple of super chats before we get out of here today as well.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. From my guy, Chris, Black Irish 864. Great show, gentlemen. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that very, very, very much. Raymond Harton had a super chat. Thank you, Ray. Not only are you guys the best in indie coverage, I also love your greater CFB coverage. Your national coverage is by far better than any other shows in the business. I appreciate that very, very much. Very, very much, guys. And there was a question that I wanted to get to. Brian Page brought up. Brian, I was going to tell you to bring this up in the mailbag tomorrow, but I probably won't be in the mailbag. He says, outside of guys like Billy Schrauth, should Notre Dame recruit more offensive tackles with the intent to move them inside, or recruit purely inside guys to play inside? Brian, I've always preferred tackles that you move into guard, but I think you'd be a fool to only do that. Like Harry Heastand predominantly recruited high school tackles and moved them inside. But that wasn't always true. Trevor Rulin, I think, was an inside guy. Tristan Hodge was an inside guy. Like, there were plenty of guys he recruited that were inside guys. So I think it depends on the player. Tyler Merrill, those are pure inside guys. I'd take them in a heartbeat. I just tended to always take it. But even like a guy like Tyler Merrill played tackle, but he's a pure guard. Ben Nichols played tackle, but he's a pure guard. You know what I mean? So I've always found that to be the way to go. But there's also guys that they've recruited that came in as interior players, and you leave them there. Billy Schrauth wasn't. He was a tackle in high school. Billy wasn't a guard in high school. He was a tackle in high school. He just was always projected to be an inside guy, and that's usually how it goes. Because a lot of times teams will put their best players to tackle. Like Cam Herron played center and guard in high school and was predominantly a center in high school, and he worked there. Ashton Craig was a tackle in high school that moved inside. So I just think it depends on the player. And if a guy plays inside in high school and he's dominant and he can move and he's got hips and he can do all these things that you're looking for, then play him there. But a lot of teams just put their best players at tackle, even though they're not gonna. Sam Mustipher was a left tackle in high school. He was never going to play tackle in college. But, you got to see some things from him playing tackle that you like. But it just depends, Brian, on the kid. It's a case-by-case basis. But my overall philosophy, without the context of specific recruits, is I like high school tackles and the bigger body types, a little bit more length that then moves inside. That's my preference. Guys like Anthony Knapp, Sullivan Absher was a tackle in high school. Ashton Craig was a tackle in high school. I prefer guys like that. But there's also some guards I've seen. I'm like, I'd take that kid in a heartbeat. Just depends on the kid.
Folks, that's going to do it for us here today. Now, a lot of mailbags coming your way. Tonight on IB Nation Sports Beat, they have their midweek mailbag. That kicks off at 5:05 p.m. Not going to want to miss that. And then Sean Davis and I will be back tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. We are going to be doing our Friday free-for-all mailbag on Thursday. So we're going to have to come up with a catchy new nickname for a Thursday free-for-all mailbag. So that's in the works right now. Salty, that might be a job for you because you're good at coming up with stuff like that. But Sean Davis and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a mailbag, and then Brian and I will be back again on Friday to go through some more Notre Dame offseason content. On your way out of here, folks, please be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here and the best way to stay in tune with everything going on Notre Dame football is be a premium message board subscriber at boards@irishbreakdown.com. A little nugget for you about the premium message board. Earlier this week, I put up a poll. And if you guys know, that poll was ongoing, and my wife is on her way home right now with the answer to that poll of what's in question. So I got a fun evening ahead of me. But, folks, until next time, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. See you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.